Hey y'all, Cat the Vat. Today I am interviewing Larell, the detrans person who's been all over my YouTube page recently. So I'm excited to hop in. I'm excited to do this, and we're gonna go ahead and get this started. Hi,
Hi,
how's it going? First, how do I pronounce your name?
it's Larell.
Larell. Okay,
Yeah.
Larell. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you making the time to come out here and chat with me.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I just want to start with, who are you, right? Like what's your gig? How would you describe yourself?
Let's see. I, as far as, yeah, I'm a spiritual teacher, meditation teacher, but I work in the field of litigated truck, bus, and forklift accidents as my profession. I work for my father's business. I'm married, of course. I have a beautiful, amazing wife that I've been married to for 7 years. We've been together for 9 years, and she went through transition with me and is still with me. And we're doing great and amazingly in love. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Grew up in California. Yeah, I guess that's all I can think of right now.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm not sure what okay. Sorry, I always get a little flustered in the beginning of these because I like to take the interviews in like a conversation style,
Yeah,
rather than like I don't know, interviews feel so like cold, right? That's not my style.
right.
But I guess I do want to ask a little bit about like what it was like for you growing up. So like I guess we can start there because that's the beginning, right? But then like I don't want to like yeah okay. What was your childhood like?
So I grew up in the Mormon church. So Mormons are very much, I was taught my whole life that I was created male in heaven before I even came to the earth. So the fact that I was boy on earth meant that I was spiritually created male and therefore will always be male for all of eternity. And
Hmm.
as a kid who felt like I was a girl in the wrong body, that really screwed with me. I could not comprehend how that was possible. I'd lay in bed at night for hours wondering, how is this possible that I never, for all of eternity, ever get to experience what it's like to be a woman? And I just could not fathom that concept. And it would freak me out because I felt this internal feeling like I have to experience that, it's who I feel like I am. And I have to experience that. And so when I was told that I will never experience that because you clearly were created male and always will be, and I don't understand how Mormons just accept that. I have other Mormons now tell me, well, yeah, I was created male and always will be. I just, I when you think about eternity, eternity is a long, long time.
It's a
And,
really long time, yeah.
and to be told that for all of eternity you're going to be a boy because you were created a boy, and inside I was struggling with all of these feelings. And of course I was in a household with a mother that was rather narcissistic. Some look at her behavior and say she clearly had borderline personality disorder, which their diagnosis, I don't, but she never had the emotional availability for me. She was there and she homeschooled me and she would do arts and crafts for me and things, but she was never that lovingly attuned to me. And then on top of that, she was always dissing on men, always saying men were disgusting monsters, acting like they were the worst people on the planet. And she would always degrade male anatomy as if it was disgusting and wrong. And so, as I was growing up in this household, I developed the belief that I was a girl in the wrong body. But it became clear as I looked back at my childhood growing up that what seemed to really actually happen was that I internalized all of this weirdness about men and how men are dangerous. And I wanted my mother's love, of course. So, in order to maintain my mother's love, I had to adapt somehow and be what she wanted. But the weird thing was that I couldn't be a girl growing up in my childhood home. Anytime I would express any signs of femininity, I would be steered away from that. Like I tell this story about my mom telling me even the proper way to look at my fingernails. I was like 6 or 7 years old, as far as I remember. I don't know why she felt the need to specify these gender norms and gender roles, but that together with my growing up not being able to accept the fact that I'd be male for all of eternity, and her degrading men and penises all the time, and being told that there's proper gender roles for people to play, I said, well, I guess I have to assign myself to one of them. I have to live one way or the other. And
Yeah.
I'd always been attracted to the soft, feminine things. I always wanted to play with dolls as a kid. And once in a while I would on the side, but for the most part, I learned very quickly that any sign towards femininity needed to be shoved right out. And so I did and held that
Yeah.
inside for years.
Did you have any siblings or was it just you?
I actually have a sister that's 3 years younger than me, but the dynamic there was that she always acted like my older sibling, and it played into weirdness as far as gender roles in my family, being a boy and together with my sister.
Yeah. What was that like? I guess like from your perspective, what was that like for her, I guess? Like growing up, like just like I'm trying to, like the dynamic. I'm not trying to ask you to speak for her. I guess I'm asking like you wanting to be a girl and her being a girl. What was that like for you mentally? Like, do you get what I'm getting at, or like the like question I'm asking?
I think so. Like when she would have slumber parties, I I went into depression because I always wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to have slumber parties myself, and my girlfriends, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, watching my sister wear the clothes that I always wanted to and get to do the girly things that I always felt I should be able to do. Who knows how much of that played into it? My child mind just identifying what she was doing. But yeah,
Were you able to have like the male equivalent of those, like sleepovers or like action GI Joes or like things like that, or were you held to like stricter standards? I guess is another question I have.
I I definitely was given boy toys, and I had a dirt bike when I was 12. And I went to Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, so I did do the male equivalent, I guess.
Were you an Eagle Scout or did you not make it that far?
I did not make it that far.
Me neither. I was also in Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
um, what about your dad?
my dad, go deal with my dog. She barking in the background. My dad, he worked a lot. He was he was not around all that much because of his job, and a lot of times my mom would just chase him off. He would come home and she'd start yelling and screaming at him until eventually he'd leave and go stay at a motel for a couple nights or something. And so although he was around some when I was a kid, and he taught me a lot of stuff. When I was really little, he used to always have me hold the flashlight for him every time he was working on something. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
grew up learning how to do everything, working in cars, working on a house. And so I had that connection with him, but there wasn't that emotional availability, father connection for me. And then anytime he was around and my mom was yelling and screaming at him, he was in a low depressed state and distant from me anyway. So I did not have much of a father role in my home. Uh, and my
Yeah.
grandparents, one of my grandpas was a raging, angry alcoholic. So I had that contrast to see.
Did you all live together, or was it like grandparents are close, but you don't live with them, but you still see them often, or like what was that dynamic?
My grandparents lived like 45-minute drive away, so we would see them fairly frequently.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious what it was like being in the church for you. You said you grew up in the church, and I'm not very familiar with Mormonism. I just hear the stories on the street,
Uh,
right? But like, what I'm curious what your experience like with that was.
for the most part, since I was born into the church, I just accepted everything they taught me as true. I accepted that God and Jesus were these white bearded men that would descend out of the sky and talk to Joseph Smith and things. And I just accepted that. I accepted the rules and commandments in the church. And the one rule that I never could wrap my mind around was the no premarital sex rule. And I understand a lot of religions have that concept, but in the Mormon church, you are literally taught that having sex outside of marriage is worse than murder. That it would be better for you to murder someone than have sex before marriage. And
Really?
yeah, and
That's wild.
they say that they straight up tell you that sexual sin is more grievous than any murder or any other sin you could make. So I grew up believing that my own body was was wrong for having sexual feelings. Anytime sexual feelings would come up in them, I'd have to try to make sense of that somehow. And one of those things that I did with that was to evolve my sexual feelings and sexual attraction towards women to myself. And I guess that then again falls into that autogynephilia category. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know whether my life really aligns with that or not, because uh, I guess being taught that being sexually attracted to someone was so wrong and something you had to crush. I just grew up obviously with these natural sexual feelings happening in my body, like happens to anybody or any male. And but
Any person, really.
right, but I was told that's wrong. You can't have those feelings, especially you can't touch yourself. And so when I went through the temple, the Mormon temple, you have to make covenants with God in the temple. You raise your hand and
When is that? Like, what age range, I guess?
that happens at 19 for boys. Typically when
Gotcha.
they're
So, like, late teens.
yeah. And so at that point I was fully immersed in the church, thought it was true. And so I went to the temple ready to make the covenants with God that I was supposed to make. And one of the covenants in there was the covenant never to have sexual relations before marriage. And that one I could never make that covenant. And I crossed my fingers behind my back when I made that covenant because I thought it was so ludicrous. And now, after leaving the church and realizing how insane that is,
When
finally,
did you leave the church?
when I was 36, so it was 2016, I think.
What was that like? That like experience, I guess.
That was scary because when you grow up your entire life with your entire reality built around this church, the church feeds you this idea of what who you are, why you're on this earth, where you're going after this life. And so I built my whole existence, my whole identity and reality around my beliefs in the church. And when it fell apart, when I realized it was all bogus, there's little truths scattered throughout it, but when I realized the reality of what the church was, I entered a serious state of being completely lost. I was lost for weeks, months, because I didn't know what to believe in now. What is God? What am I? What does God exist at all? And I entered a state of absolute atheism for a long time because I thought there's nothing out there. If this church wasn't true and this God wasn't true, then nothing exists. And that's not a fun place to be in either. It, a lot of people find happiness and comfort in atheism, but I personally found it to be a lonely place where I had no guidance and no feeling of structure.
Yeah. Was your wife also Mormon? Is she also Mormon, or is she not in the church?
She was never in the church. I married her fully convinced that I was going to get her to come into the church because as a Mormon, I was still a member when I met her, and it was her that kind of helped me come out. But I was fully convinced I was going to convince her to be baptized and come
Yeah.
to church with me.
And then she got you actually.
Uh-huh. Backfired.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I got off track. Going back to I guess your earlier years. you got your, or you like went to that flight school thing, or you got like I've watched enough of your interviews that I know enough general lore, but I
Yeah.
do want to ask. So you got that like flight certificate at 14. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what caused that to happen? What led to you like doing that as a homeschooled Mormon
Uh,
kid?
I guess for one, being homeschooled, it opens your mind to many different options and ventures you could possibly take. And I was 9 years old, and my dad took me to a local county fair at the time in California. That was Larry County, California, I think. And they had a helicopter there that was giving people rides, and he took me for a ride in the helicopter. And it was right then and there I decided I have to be a helicopter pilot. This is the most amazing thing in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so I pursued it and made it all the way through my commercial pilot's license. I had my first lesson at 14, but I didn't actually get my license till I was 20 something. I
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
kind of put it on hold for a while because I realized I was too young and nobody was going to take me
Yeah.
serious.
And then another question I have from around that time is, was it a Mormon charter school, or like what was the charter school that you were attending? Or not
Initially,
not by name if you don't want to. I don't want to dox you. Is what I'm saying. I just want to get your experiences, I guess.
yeah, initially, my mom, this was back in the mid 80s that my mom decided to homeschool me. So, like 1987, I think. And at
Mm,
that time, there basically were no charter schools around. There was no homeschool structure. So she took it all on herself. And then later, it was later, like in my high school years, that we finally joined a charter school, I think. Well, actually, I think it was like when I was 10, we found a charter school to join, but it was not involved in the Mormon church. No, it was just a local something with the school system.
did you like that, or like what was that like? Was that a hard adjustment going from homeschool to like a school with more people in it, for lack of better words?
There there still was hardly any social interaction, actually. As
Really?
far as the charter school went, mostly we would sometimes go there for events, but I would still do all of my school work at home. And so I really didn't get to know anybody at the charter school.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And then I one thing I am curious. I'm jumping around. Sorry, because I'm in my brain. But I'm curious if you had ever been exposed to like trans people when you were a kid. Some of the stuff I've watched from you says like you had never even heard of them, but you were still having these feelings. So, but then I've also heard you talk about like the people in the schools talking about it. So I guess that's kind of what I'm like hitting on here is like, had you heard of it before, or like what? Who's the first trans person that you saw? That's what I'm gonna ask.
Okay. So the very first trans person I'm aware of that I saw, and I I didn't know what it was, what they were. I was on my mission for the Mormon Church in Ohio, I think it was at the time. And one of the people we were trying to teach the church to was a trans woman. And I remember walking in and seeing this, what I perceived at the time as a man dressed as a woman. And I'm like, and and his arms were shaved and things. And I just sat there. It confused me because I had never been around this before. I had never been around anybody presenting as a different gender. I was 19 years old at the time. And then
Yeah,
so it was weird to me, but I thought it was just that was just him being who he was, and I didn't know that he identified as a she. For all I thought perhaps it was a drag queen or something, and so I was just so sheltered from any concept of varying gender identities. I knew what gay people were, and I knew what drag queens were. I knew I wasn't either of those. I just knew that I felt like I was a girl inside ever since I was just really little. And it confused the hell out of me because I thought I was the only person on the planet that felt that way. And it didn't make any sense to me. I'd searched the internet hundreds of times trying to find answers. What is this? But somehow I never came across the term transgender until I was in my mid 20s or so. Just happened to search the right thing, the right search term, and it brought something up that all of a sudden made me aware this is actually a thing. This is something
Yeah.
people struggle with, not
What
just
was
me.
that like?
It was a huge wave of relief and happiness to see that there was potentially a possibility to actually do something about these feelings, that I didn't just have to live with it and suppress it. Thought that there was a possibility of hormone therapy and surgeries, although at the time when I discovered it, I was, like I said, like 26 years old or so, and testosterone had already done what it was going to do to my body at that point. So, for the most part, on one hand, I was all excited about the potential to become the woman I felt I was, but then on the other hand, I'd look at myself and say, "There's no way. I am clearly a man. I will never pass." And so I kind of put it off as a possibility for a while. So,
Yeah. Was it just like the kind of internal, oh, it's too late for me feelings, or was there also like, or
mm,
I'm assuming there were fears about like your family and things, right?
oh yes.
'Cause what are kind of some of the thoughts there? And also, just because I don't, I feel like I'm cheating because I've seen enough of your videos, but what was their reaction when you did come out? Or like what was do you wait, do they okay, sorry, I'm jumping here. I've heard stories of people that are in churches that leave the church and then their families don't talk to them anymore.
Mm,
Is that what your parents did or your family did?
basically, and if they would talk to me, it was only to criticize me or tell me what I was doing wrong in my life. And, that was one of the biggest fears for me. Absolutely, when I've always been living with this feeling inside that I kept crushed, but I knew that I could never let it out. I could never let them know I was struggling with these feelings. I thought surely they'd send me to a mental hospital for the rest of my life, because what do you do with someone who's born male and identifies as female? And it was such a new concept to me. And I thought there's no possible way I can tell my family. I even considered, because I knew it would be so impossible, and this is a weird part of my story that I don't tell very much. I realized it would be so impossible to pass and that my family would never accept me as female, that I had considered finding someone to do the surgery on me and continuing to live as a man with a vagina. And at home, I would dress as a woman and feel good in my body. But since the world's not ready to accept me as a non passing man wearing a dress, then I'll just do it at home. As long as I have the body parts at home, I'll be okay. So I literally looked into figuring out how to have the surgery without going through all the actual transition part, because that was what was most important to me personally, was the body part. I thought that if
Yeah.
I had that body part, it would make me feel more like the girl I felt like I was. And that was my ultimate goal, is to get that surgery no matter what.
Yeah. That's very intriguing.
Yeah, that's a little detail that I tend to forget sometimes, and forget to talk about the fact that I was willing to have the surgery without transitioning, just because that was so important to me, that as far as I knew, I would have the right body parts. And
And that and sorry.
it's an interesting thing now to live with, now that I identify as a man, but I have that part and I can still have sexual feelings about it. And so, like, I can still pretend that I'm a girl when I want to, if I desire to get myself turned on that way, but I try not
Mhm.
to, because I'm trying to realign my whole system back to my biology, which actually feels right now to me. And that's the weirdest thing, because I went forever believing this will never change. I am this way, I will die this way. And that's what freaked me out, is that it all of a sudden just changed. And then I find myself living as a man and identifying as a man, feeling like a man, but having the wrong body. That is weird.
Yeah. That is really like interesting that you mentioned that. And that was like in your mid late 20s when you said you like first started thinking that?
Yeah.
It's actually really interesting that you kind of did it essentially, right? Like that thing that you talked about, and now you identify as a man out in public,
Uh,
and I don't know what you do at home, right? But like your body is the way that you wanted it to be at that time. So in a way, a past you has achieved that goal.
it did.
Um,
I
so
desperately miss my penis now, so that's unfortunate. But I can still be content with what I have. It's weird.
yeah,
Every
that's something. Sorry.
as say everything's fluid, I guess. And
Yeah,
gender norms and binaries are what our society makes us think they have to be, what the expectation is, and we try to
but they
align to
don't.
that. No, they don't. Not at all.
It's all fake. It's all just fake.
Uh,
Um, but building on what we were just talking about, I am curious. Do you think that it? I don't know how to phrase it, but like, do you think that your biggest gripe with like transitioning was the complications from your surgery, or like, do you think that even without having gotten SRS or GRS, I always get confused at what the different terms are. But without having gotten bottom surgery, do you think you still would be in the same place today, even if you had kept like your parts but just stayed on hormones? For example, just I'm giving an example.
that is an interesting question because, yeah, had I one thing I recognize is that this is a path I had to take. I honestly can't say had I never had surgery that I would be where I'm at now. For all I know, I might still be struggling with serious depression. Like, I have to do this, I have to get that surgery. And until I got it and satisfied that, I don't know that I would have ever gotten over it. And so now to look at what happened, what transpired, and to say, had I been convinced not to have the surgery back then, how would I be now? Would I be happy and content as a man with my male body parts? Or would I still be struggling, wishing I had done it? But I'm going to have to sort that one out. That is a
Okay,
good
yeah,
question.
thank you. Um, Well, okay. That is actually. Let me find it because I have like multiple pages. I've been taking notes as I've been watching your videos, and I have like questions written down. So that's the other thing. I don't want to ask all of them because I feel like it might take too much of your time. But I might make a video like asking you questions, and I would love if you like responded to it. Yeah, I
Oh,
love like the
yeah,
back and forth stuff between creators. So
that'd be great.
okay, I will keep that in mind then. But let me see. Mm-mm-mm. There was I'll just talk while I look for it. There was something you had mentioned about one like people being able to like uh oh yeah, okay. Something else I was curious about would was that like do you think you could have transitioned and been happy if you hadn't been like forced or heavily encouraged to be a man, which was also heavily stigmatized in your household for like 40 years? Um because you always talk about like past experiences building lenses that all of us use to like view the world, which I completely agree with, and I don't disagree with you there. But I guess I'm curious if you, and this is another like if you had done something different, how would you feel? Which I know they're bad questions, but like I guess I'm curious in your opinion. Like imagine you were somebody today and you were able to talk to your family about like your feelings, right? Like do you get what I'm asking? Like, if you weren't in a household that would have like disowned you for it, and you were in a household that was like at least on the face accepting, right? Let's say a liberal family, they say they're accepting, they might like delay you with your doctors or whatever, but like they say they're accepting. Do you think that you would have transitioned younger, or do you think that you still? Oh well, no, that's not what I asked. Would you have been happier being trans if you like didn't have a wife already and you didn't have like a life built as a man? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's, let me see how to answer that one. First of all, going, yeah, back to how I was raised, had I been allowed to express myself, my feminine nature, there's possibility that I would have just felt like, okay, this is safe to do, this is safe to express myself, my feminine gender. And then I might not have ever had to actually transition for all I know. That might have satisfied the need to explore that and get it out of my system and then go back to my biology. But the way it happened was it was so crushed, any femininity was crushed out of me that it still remains something that I felt like I had to experience in my life. I have to
It just
experience
like
what it's like.
festers inside because you
Yeah,
can't do it outside. Yeah.
right. And had I grown up in a childhood where either had they allowed me to transition, that one I I might I might have, because one of my big things when I discovered what being transgender was I started looking back at my childhood and thinking, well, damn, if I was like Jazz Jennings and had been able to go on puberty blockers early enough, my body wouldn't have been destroyed by this testosterone, and I'd be a beautiful feminine woman now. And so I wished so bad that I had the opportunity to transition early. Of course, now I don't. Now coming back, but then again, if had I who knows if had I transitioned young, perhaps I would be perfectly happy with it now and would stay transitioned because my body would feel so manly. But I don't think that really played into inability. My inability to pass did kind of play into my realizing that I needed to detransition because I realized that I was living so uncomfortable in the world all the time. Every day I'm going out and feeling all this anxiety that people are looking at me funny. Life is more difficult as a trans person. I can't get anybody to take me seriously. I present a business venture idea and they just kind of turn it away like, yeah, because I I guess I was seen as lesser. And who knows if I had started young and was able to pass at this point, perhaps it might still feel right. And but at the same time, I recognize all of our beliefs. The beliefs are about ourselves. Our perceptions of the world is formed by every experience we ever had up to this point.
Of
So
course, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for like, I don't know, what's the word? Entertaining me, I guess, with my like hypotheticals. I just get curious.
I
And
love
I,
it.
you know, yeah, I feel like a lot of people like to just discount detrans people. But in my opinion, you're just trans twice, which means you have twice as much wisdom, right? So like, I don't know.
Right.
Anyways, what I would side note, I would love to see a video of you talking to this person named Call Me Sam. He's another detrans individual who like posts videos just like talking about his life, his thoughts. And I think a conversation between you two would be super interesting,
Yeah.
but he's super hard to get a hold of. But maybe he would be more likely to talk to you than me. Anyways, sorry, not to detract from this conversation though. I also am curious, like, what was your life like, I guess? Like I know that you started driving like a logging truck at 18, right? And then you just did that for 30 years or like
I let's see. So I drove logging truck when I was 18 till 19. Then I went on my mission for the Mormon Church from 19 to 22. That was the year 2000 to 2002. And then when I came home from my mission, I went back to driving my logging truck for a year. And then in 2003, I went to my helicopter flight school, went back to it when I was 23, and then did that till 2005. Got my commercial helicopter pilot's license in 2005 at 25, and but then realized I couldn't get a job flying because I didn't have enough flight hours, and it was going to cost way too much to build up the flight hours. So I decided just to go back to driving a truck. Realized driving a truck was basically the same thing as flying a helicopter, but you're on the ground. I I had an opportunity to work with helicopters while I was getting my license and discovered that all they do is just fly back and forth all day long. And I thought this isn't actually as exciting as I originally thought it was going to be. So I decided to go back to driving my truck, then drove my truck for 2005 to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then 2013, I moved up to Oregon and kept driving my truck. But then in 2014, I decided to stop and work for my dad's business, which is still in the trucking industry, but a different way. I no longer drive trucks, but I work on truck accidents, compiling reports to law firms telling them who was at fault and why. It's a
Interesting.
fascinating job. I get exposed to every possible way of dying on the highway you could possibly think of.
I bet that's terrifying when you're like driving around or like your wife is driving around and
Yeah,
that's all you think about is all these accidents you've seen.
because I know too well how easy these things happen. And I see it all the time. And I get all the videos and pictures of blood and guts all over the road, and it disturbs me. And you can't unsee that stuff. So it really affects my emotional state doing this job.
Yeah.
I'd rather be doing something else where I'm actually helping people rather than, well, I'm kind of helping the victims of the accident to get insurance money, but it's just not the best. Someone else
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're trying to do with your YouTube? Is like become like a spiritual teacher, help people, like give advice, or just be like a content creator basically?
Yeah, it has been my dream for a long time to do things like make documentaries, things
Really?
that really speak to people, tell people stories. But my wife and I, yeah, we're trying to build business right now where we coach couples through their relationship issues. And being having gone through the whole trans marriage thing, it gives us understanding and knowledge and wisdom of dynamics between couples that normally you wouldn't even be aware of is going on. But also, my wife and I are very trauma informed, and we understand human psychology and what forms people to be who they are. And so it really plays into helping people in their relationship to understand what childhood parts are coming up in an argument, and that it's not actually about what's going on between you right now. It's your true
It's about what's
childhood.
going on in here
Uh-huh.
in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we get in our heads and we try to think too much, and our partner says something and we immediately, what did they mean by that? And then it starts more thoughts, and we could have just stayed present with the initial statement, but what did you mean by that? And so we cause our own problems. Yeah, my wife and I
Yeah.
are working on doing more of that, and that feels good.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad that you're able to like find something that feels good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, there was I wanted to ask something else when you start. It was in the like it was about something you just talked about. That oh yeah, you said you wanted to like make documentaries for like a long time. Like, what is your I guess history with wanting to be a filmmaker or like a video person for lack of better words?
Yeah. Ever since I was like 6 years old, I had a camera in my hand everywhere I
Really?
went. I have so many thousands of random pictures, but of course my photography skills developed over the years, got better.
Of
But
course, of
then
course.
in about 2004, I discovered video and how
Mm-hmm.
it's a moving picture. It's so you can tell so much more of a story in it. So I became so fascinated with video, and I started making all these little videos. I've had YouTube accounts ever since YouTube first came out, and I used to have an account that was getting millions of views on the videos. Truck videos
Really?
at the time. They were nothing special, but just truck videos. And so I've been making videos for a lot of my life, but I've always wanted to put that creative effort towards something good because I keep making all these stupid little videos here and there because I just wanted to be creative but didn't have a passion to put it towards. And so I always thought if I could make documentaries about people's lives, and now I stumbled upon this whole thing, a
You get
huge
to make them about yourself.
source of content. Yeah.
uh, do you want to be famous or like would you like to achieve fame or is that not really something like some people really want it, some people don't really care, and then some people really don't want it. So I guess I'm curious like where you fall on that.
As far as my astrological sign goes, I'm a rising Leo, so I guess I'm supposed to want to be in the light. I've never actually wanted fame. I always
Hmm.
knew that I wanted to become known for something. So I guess maybe certain level of fame, but it's not that I'm seeking fame. If I were to achieve fame, I would want it to be in something that is really benefiting other people, like what I'm doing now, getting my story out there and getting known by so many people. I do so only because I see the benefit and then hearing my story and hearing my perspectives, and hopefully some things that I say can speak to the right people's hearts. I hope.
Yeah, I can see that. I think you probably have a good shot with this topic. Truthfully, it seems like detrans content tends to have a very dedicated audience,
Yeah,
in who watches it. How has that been for you? Like navigating that audience or that like niche of the internet.
it's been weird. For one, I've never gained this kind of recognition before, where it's so many
Almost like
people.
700 subs in like the last week, right?
Yeah, it was insane. And like, I put a video on YouTube. I'm used to making videos, putting them on YouTube, and it gets maybe 20 views in weeks. And this one of mine went to like 64,000 views in just a week or so. And it blows my mind. And all the comments, I expected when I started making these detrans videos, I expected to be bombarded with all kinds of negativity and you're trying to eradicate the world of trans people. I have been accused of that one many times. I love all people. I love all expressions. It's just I'm just trying to tell my story to hopefully help others from suffering the grief that I went through, to maybe consider the possibility that this may change sometime. You might not live with this for the rest of your life. And so that's it's been fascinating because I thought that I would just be bombarded with death threats and all kinds of things for telling the truth. And initially, I started to on my Facebook. There was a couple of my trans friends that I had been friends with. Then they start telling me, "You're doing a terrible thing. You are going to cause harm to trans people." And I really don't want that. I'm honest. I love everybody. I just want, and it's because I love everybody. I don't want to see anybody hurt. I don't want to see anybody suffer the kind of grief that I've had to go through when you realize that maybe you shouldn't have done something so permanent to your body.
Yeah. I can definitely understand that. And I would agree with you that sometimes like I mentioned, I'm not going to say all trans people, but people that are very very pro trans, not just like supportive of trans people, but you get the idea that I'm going for,
Yeah,
are hostile to like detrans people. But again, I feel like as long as you're not actively going out of your way to like hurt trans people, then like it's
yeah,
not super bad. But on that, I would take that you do support like people having the right to transition or like access to hormones, even access to surgeries past a certain age. Nobody's saying like
right,
cut up a 12-year-old. No, nobody's saying that. Um, but like
exactly,
you support people having the freedom, I guess, to like do
right.
what they want in their lives.
Because really, it's your life, it's your body, and you ultimately, as long as you are an adult and you have the mental ability to make that decision, that it's your body. And if like Buck Angel, for example, he straight out told me on the interview, I know it's a mental illness. I mean, I don't like to, I never like to accept that I had a mental illness. I didn't like anybody to call it that because it's what I felt was true to myself. And even if you, like Buck, know that you were born a certain gender, but you decide, hey, I want to live the opposite gender, more power to you. I think that's amazing. I think that's great. When you do it when you're in a relationship like I do, it sadly brings other people into it with you that were unwilling parties to the whole thing. And it did affect my wife and daughter tremendously, me doing that. And so I don't really like to see that happen. But as long as people navigate it together and feel good about it, yeah, I'm all for adults having the ability to do things they want to. I had weight loss surgery, for example. That's something that's not necessarily necessary. I could have exercised more and eaten better, but that was something I did to my body by choice as an adult, just like transition, only transition I felt like was literally my identity that I was aligning my body to match. And so, yeah, I definitely am not anti-trans. Not. I sometimes. I can sometimes reply to people's comments, and because I don't want to take the time to type out a long comment, I think I maybe sometimes come across like nobody should transition, but that's mostly, like I said, because I'm trying to quickly respond and don't want to explain the whole thing, what my whole stance is on it. Because I think
Yeah.
if you're an adult and you want to live however, that's your right.
What do you think about like the people in your audience that are only supportive of you because you're like not anti-trans, but like they see you as anti-trans and that's why they like you? Like I guess what do you think about the people that aren't doing it out of love but are doing it out of insecurity of themselves, out of hate, out of like some negative emotion?
Yeah, that one's interesting too, because yeah, I see that a lot. I see a lot of the commenters are like, "Good for you to be so anti-trans," and I don't like that. I don't like that aspect of it because I don't want to draw any negativity to anybody. I don't want to put negative ideas into the world. I like to hope that I present myself in a loving way that people see that I'm not trying to destroy anybody's lives or way of being, but just trying to express some additional perspectives. And yeah, I I don't like this, those parts of me that don't like that I appeal to the ones that are so anti-trans and they tell me I'm doing such a good thing because they see me doing good things speaking out against trans people, whereas I'm trying to do a good thing just simply sharing my story and speaking the truth to what can happen in a person's psychology. We are complex beings as humans, and nothing is really set in stone as far as your mentality goes.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I guess from your perspective, and I know you're relatively new to the limelight, I think is the term, but what would you say about like detrans creators or people like making detrans videos, detrans podcasts, etc., or like that kind of viewpoint, but they are more in it for not out of hate, but more in it for like the money or like the pandering, I guess,
Uh,
to the audience, rather than the love. Is it this really what I'm coming back to? Is like,
yes,
what does that look like from your perspective as another detrans creator?
I am trying not to become that. I don't want, I mean, YouTube is a way to make money, and if I make some money from it, then great, but I am not trying to make money off of this, and I could see where that could be a perception of some people. Like, I don't know what your feelings are on Blair White. Blair White is one of those trans people who has made millions of dollars on their identity of being trans, and that too, whether either
Yeah,
way you put it,
she definitely is a little intense at times. But recently, I've been seeing her taking a lot of kind of similar viewpoints as yours, kind of talking about her
yeah,
trauma a lot, talking about her childhood,
right,
um, and things like that. So I think I don't know. In the past, she's definitely made some problematic content,
yeah,
but it is her job, so that's kind of what you expect from somebody there. But I guess I'm not trying to like accuse you of doing that.
mhm,
I guess I'm asking more like how do you feel about people that do kind of lump you in with them or like I don't know. I don't know how to phrase it, but like you exist in that same ecosystem, I guess. So those are
yeah,
like your like peers, your like competition, I guess. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm coming for. Those are a lot of people inviting you on podcasts. Those are a lot of people trying to talk to you right now.
yeah,
So like yeah, so that's what I'm asking.
yeah. That it will be an interesting thing to navigate more as I guess yeah, I definitely don't want to be bundled in with that crowd, the crowd that is so like I even have people coming on my videos. What's missing from your message is God, trying to tell me I'm not putting enough God into my message. But that's divisive language, and that's my whole point is I don't want to be all opinionated and divisive. I want to be more from the heart, where I speak to people in a loving way, that because that's my message, is a loving message to please consider not harming yourself, but not, it's wrong for you to be doing what you're doing. Jesus said this, and you shouldn't do that. And I try not to become part of that whole crowd, or even be perceived as part of that. And I hope I'm not coming across too much as trying to make money off of my identity.
I definitely have not gotten that, and well, at times I get that impression a little bit, but for the most part, I don't really get that impression from you. And I notice you say things like, if your child does come to you and like expresses this to you, like don't respond hatefully. Gather yourself, respond with love, like let them know you care about them, let you know you still support them, and like you're very a lot of other creators would have very different things to say about a question like that.
Yeah,
So
like
I
immediately beat it out of them.
yeah, yeah, kick them out of the house. Make sure they know that they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't get that vibe from you.
that's good.
Some of the people you've talked to, sometimes I get that vibe a little bit from them. And that's kind of why I'm bringing it up. And that's what I mean, like a little bit, like when they're like trying to hit you with their points and you're responding to their points, like, eh. But like
Yeah,
all of your videos, all of your like organic videos, I don't feel it at all.
that's good. Yeah, that's, I like the diversity of being interviewed by numerous different kinds of people on different paths, because it brings a difference to the interview. Like, of course, depending on who interviews me, it's probably going to go a certain way, and I'm going to do my best to try to keep it on track and not let the conversation go to a real negative. And hopefully, I can do that regardless of who I'm being interviewed by.
Yeah. Yeah. How many interviews have you gotten so far? Like, it seems like you've been pretty busy with them, just in trying to schedule this with you.
Yeah, so there's been a couple of them that they kept rescheduling on me, so that was screwing up scheduling things. But so far, I think I've done, was this my fourth? Not a whole lot yet, but I've got
But they're coming.
I've got like 3 or 4 people right now trying. A couple of them are just kind of small YouTube accounts that reached out to me, but yeah.
I'm one of those.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Me too, me too, me too. Okay, I was curious. This is based on something you said a while ago, so I'm really sorry to rip us back there, but I'm curious, like, what was the moment that you realized detransition was right for you? Like, when in your transition was that kind of the thing that was on your mind? Was there like a moment? Was there an experience? Was there a conversation? You know what I mean? Like, what was the when did you know?
So last year, it was probably August or so of last year, that my wife and I, we we sometimes use cannabis to sleep at night. We It helps us sleep, help calm down and things. But we noticed that when we do, we don't dream. And so, and some other things, using it all the time, using a substance outside yourself is never that great. But so we decided to cut it off for a while and stopped using cannabis. But when we did, all of a sudden I started having these really vivid dreams. And one of the dreams I had was a super vivid dream that somehow took me through the process of, of a person's developing identity, and how gender identity develops in a person. Like I was able to see my own childhood experiences in sequential progression in such a way that I was able to understand how most people develop a sense of gender identity. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, I woke up from this dream realizing, oh shit, I'm a program. I only feel this way because of my childhood. And but then I had had the surgery and was living as a woman for 6 years at this point. And so I just kind of put it in the back of my mind, kept processing it, kept thinking about it. And then I was doing training for a therapy modality called internal family systems therapy by Dr. Richard Schwartz. And and this is a therapy modality that acknowledges that we all have within us these different parts, not like DID, but it's kind of similar, only we don't allow any of them to take over control of us all the time, like in DID. But every one of us has all these parts within us. And during the training, one of the other students asked the instructor, so do you think that gender identity is a part, as in a part of us that developed in the past through childhood experiences? And as soon as I heard that question, I listened real close, like, what is she going to say in answer to this? And
Mm-hmm.
the instructor, she said, I actually don't believe it's a part, but the creator of internal family systems therapy, Dr. Richard Schwartz, he does believe it's a part. And
Mm.
I sat there like, oh, really? Like, so that means that he believes that if you're trans, that was something that developed in your childhood through experiences. And I fought with that for a long time because I thought I was born this way. That is not true. This is not something that developed over the course of my childhood. This is something I was born with. It's a genetic thing. My brain is female. And so I fought with it for a long time. But then on October 22nd, this date stands out big for me because on that date, my wife and I were struggling to have sexual relations because I had the wrong part and I couldn't get my mind around the psychology of it. And we're trying to figure out what is wrong with our sex life. And I'm a psilocybin mushroom user. I love psychedelic mushrooms. I think they have profoundly helped me to understand my identity and who I am. So I decided to do a small mushroom journey on October 22nd, specifically with this new knowledge, this new understanding of gender identity to try to sort out what does it mean to be trans? What am I? And so I
Mm-hmm.
took the mushrooms and I laid down, and it was the craziest thing because all of a sudden it all came together in my mind to where I understood that the only reason I ever transitioned was genuinely because I was afraid to be a boy as a child. That and it all unfolded in my mind in such a way that I was able to see, oh crap, I have to detransition. There's no other choice. This is just what I have to do. And I was realizing I'm constantly swimming against the stream trying to live this way. I'm taking hormones that define my biology. My muscles all went away. My sex drive went away. I was suffering weakness and decreased muscle bone density and things from taking estrogen for so long. And when all of that came together, and I realized life actually right now would be so much easier if I was just living true to my biology. And just in that one day, all of a sudden, it was leading up to it, those other experiences I had, but that was the day that it really finally just came to me in a way that I couldn't deny it anymore. And so I went and told my wife, I got something to tell you. Don't know how to tell you this. I know I already
Coming out
drug you.
part two.
I know I already drug you through this all the first time, and you got used to living with me as a woman. And but now I have to go back to being a man. And that I think almost rocked our relationship worse than the first time.
Really?
Yeah, because now all of a sudden she had to look back and realize all the ways that she gave up her femininity to make space for my femininity in the relationship. Like she would make all our phone calls, she would schedule things for us because I didn't want to be the misgendered on the phone all the time.
Yeah.
And there were ways in our relationship where she stopped taking care of herself as well. She stopped doing her makeup, wearing her feminine clothes as much because I was the one doing all of that, and she is such an amazing person that she was so supportive of me that she's like, this is your light, you take it. Here's some beautiful dresses for you. She would buy me dresses and things and fully supported me, and it was absolutely amazing. But when I detransitioned, she had to face the reality that all of that was her trying to align herself to something to make space for me. And so it really caused a lot of destability again in our relationship that lasted a few months until we finally settled back down to what this means now for me to be a man and her the woman.
Yeah. How has that been now? Has it like is it would you say it's stronger than before you transitioned the first time, or would you say it's like how would you rank before transitioning, while transitioning, after? And I know that one's recent because if y'all were fighting for a couple months, that means it's been at max like 4 months. So
Yeah,
like still recent, but I guess I'm curious how you would like rank them up.
yeah. I'm not sure how to rank it necessarily, but before transition, we were madly in love, super madly in love, but there was always that underlying I can't be a man, so I trying to have sex with her was very it happened for a long time, but it was difficult and it became more and more difficult the longer into our relationship that I realized I need to transition. And then when I transitioned, then I had the weirdness of trying to align with I go out in the world living as a female. I feel like a female inside, but then when I'm at home in bed with my wife, I don't have my wig on. I feel like I'm a man again. And it would cause all this weird psychological stuff. It was so hard to deal with, which is similar to what I experienced after I detransitioned, having the wrong body. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, now we're more in love and closer than we've ever been, having gone through this whole thing and navigated it and come out on the other side. And it is still fairly recent, but it was only just recently that we finally, like in the last month or so, that we finally kind of sorted out and started to be able to have sexual relations like normal again. Not normal. It's never going to be normal, but as normal as possible with the parts.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that. Mm, I'm glad that transitioning and then detransitioning has helped your relationship. But I think it would have been better to make a joke about how people should transition to get closer to their partner here.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's a new relationship skill. We got to transition.
Yeah, call that transmaxing.
Oh God,
Um, but okay, I have a couple questions that people I like I so we're in a Discord server right now and there's like 200 people here. And so I just like whenever I do interviews, I like to ask like do you have any questions for this person?
yeah,
So I would like to do some of those now. Oh wait, before you do that, when did you get your bottom surgery? Cuz I'm curious how long it was from the end of your transition cuz you mentioned the like bone loss and you in videos you mentioned that's due to also a lack of testosterone and
yeah.
like things like that. So I guess I'm curious like how long was that?
July 9th of 2019 was when I had the surgery, so it was about yeah a little over 4 years that I was living, having had the surgery before I detransitioned.
Yeah.
And yeah, that when I started on spironolactone immediately in 2017. So that was cutting down my testosterone very early on. And then when I had surgery and lost my testosterone generators, then I was even at even less. And I stupid little things like trying to push a door open to go into a business, I found it was starting to be difficult. The door was biting me. My camp or my computer bag, I tried to lift it into my car and I couldn't lift it up. I'm like, this what is going on here? I feel so weak. And part of me liked that because I was like, yeah, I'm a weak
Yeah.
feminine girl. It feels more in alignment. But it got to a point where I realized it was going too far that way. Like I was even weaker than a biological equivalent this female would have been. And that's when I
Mhm.
realized this is not good. Something bad is happening.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel like there's something that you can't say in trans spaces?
Um, I guess things that are offensive. For one, I don't want to offend anybody. I never want to hurt anybody.
Do you say
But
them when you're not in trans spaces?
no, no. See that Yeah, even when me and my wife are talking, we're not like real negative and opinionated about it because we recognize I have this concept of radical validation that I believe is necessary for all people because especially like kids and our minds are such that when we develop a perspective of something, that becomes our perspective entirely. No one else is going to be able to sway us. Someone could if they said the right thing, but as far as trying to sway someone, I would never try to get someone to change. And so, saying things in trans spaces, I try to. I guess, yeah, I don't know that there's definitely a lot of stuff that I would not say in trans spaces as a choice to, but I'm not. I'm trying to determine the context of the question so I can
Oh,
properly answer it.
yeah. Okay, let me see if there is context here. I think this person was expecting you to go on a rant at that point because again, a lot of people just have they hear detrans and then that's all they think.
Yeah,
Okay, somebody called you so epic, it's like you're the avatar master of all four elements, but then the Fire Nation attacked or something. Okay, that one wasn't a question. That was just a comment.
that's fun.
Yeah, and then okay. Ooh, that one has the R word in it. I'm not gonna say that one. Give me 1 second. Okay, they rephrased it. Okay, so I'm gonna tell. I'm gonna. Okay, okay. I rephrased their question and then they gave context. So I'm just gonna say all of that and then let you just handle it.
Okay.
So do you think that popular pro detrans spaces come from a good place, from a place of personal gain, from a place of self hatred, or somewhere else entirely? And then they clarified that they don't mean it in a personal way, like from the perspective of the trans people themselves, but instead from concerned parents and from gender critical activists who seem really obsessed with with the topic. Like you see a detrans video, the person talking seems to have suffered and to indeed express some forbidden things, and it's an interesting video, and then you scroll to the comments and it's full of r-worded takes veiled as support, which is kind of what we mentioned earlier with like people that only like you because you're not like exclusively pro-trans.
Right. Yeah. I. Hmm, yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think how to answer that
You can
because
take a minute if that would help.
yeah. I yeah. I guess just going along the same lines. Like I guess is the question kind of like are there things that I'm afraid to say in trans spaces because I'm still trying to really understand because I really try not to say things that because for one I want my message to be heard. I want people to hear the context of what I'm trying to get out. And so I try to keep the space open or the path open for that possibility by not saying things that I know are going to trigger people or offend people. Like I wouldn't get on and say nobody should ever transition because to each personal individual's perspectives, that might feel in every way, shape, and form what needs to happen. And so I would validate that perspective without, like, as far as kids go, I try really hard not to encourage parents to affirm their kids' identity, but to support them and love them without making it clear that like the whole trans ideology seems to be that if you're struggling with this mentality, then this is the answer. This is the path you should take, rather than perhaps maybe we should consider why that mentality is what you're struggling with. It, it's like It's like if someone was struggling with depression, we would never suggest, oh, the path is to go have your leg surgically amputated and then you'd be happy.
Well, a lot of depression and like depressive disorders do get treated with antidepressants.
Right. Yeah. So there's still medical intervention for something that is going on inside. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Do you not really agree with that either?
see that's another thing. I understand so well what forms a person to develop a depressive state that to to give them medications to resolve something that was formed through perspectives and beliefs and things over a person's lifetime, it does get a little tricky because who's to say that because a person's mind formed the way it did, now we treat it medically rather than and therapy as a whole. I don't necessarily agree entirely with one-on-one therapy because the problem with one-on-one therapy is it tends to reinforce whatever issues are already in you. Whereas when you're in a group setting and you see other people in the group, oh, maybe this problem I have isn't as big of a problem. That person has the same issue, but they navigate it this way. And it just group therapy or group programs seem to be such a better way. But yeah,
Yeah,
talk.
it lets people develop their, like you said, people make their own perspectives. In a group therapy situation, you can develop your perspective based on somebody else's life experience.
Yeah,
Whereas I agree with you, one on one, it seems like the therapist just affirms you, and then you're like, no, I'm looking for new perspectives here, right? And then
uh-huh,
they never have the new perspectives. They just want to like keep going with what you have. Anyways, I agree with you on that one.
yeah.
But uh, I'm kind of curious what you mean by that. Especially if it was like, I don't know, like let's say a 16-year-old, right? So like, and again, I'm not saying surgeries, because ultimately, I think I agree more with the people that are a little more conservative, like don't get a surgery until you're at least a legal adult. Like if what you want to do with your body, that's fine. But I low key do agree. Don't get surgeries because even if the people that do get surgeries that young often end up having more issues because their bodies aren't fully developed as it like you're like I've heard Jazz Jennings has a decent amount of issues due to her extremely early intervention, but it wasn't like the hormones, it was the it's the surgery. But anyways, how do you feel about hormones, I guess? Like let's say a 16-year-old goes to their parents, right? And they're like, I really feel like this is my truth, right? And like through your approach, you're saying the parents should be like loving, so not too affirmative, but supportive. Like what
Yeah.
does that look like, right? Because that 16-year-old still has to live for the next 2 years until they reach legal adulthood. So like how would you manage that dynamic best help everybody, I guess? For in your perspective, of course. I'm not asking for like a clinical medical
Mhm.
advice. I'm asking like, yeah, just I unplugged my headphones. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Could you talk again just so I can make sure they work?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sound
they
good?
broke.
Uh-oh.
Hel- Okay, I think
Testing.
we're fixed. We're
Okay.
fixed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yes, as far as hormones go, that one's a really tough one to navigate because the hormones do help you feel so good as a trans girl. When I first started taking hormones, it was so euphoric. It felt so amazing, and I my breasts started to grow and be sensitive, and that was affirming to who I felt I was, and that was amazing. But when it I guess the issue I see is that hormones do cause changes in the body, and that's why we take them as a trans person to do cause those changes that we want. But I think where I for a trans girl to take hormones, if you're born male and take female hormones, it causes your breast to form, it might cause your bones to decrease, muscle mass to decrease. But for trans men, that is where I see more people detransitioning now, having long term effects from taking hormones that they can't undo. And so, like young teenagers that got on testosterone and their voice lowers, and they develop all this body hair and things that the body hair might go away, but their voice never goes away. Their low voice never goes away, even after they stop hormones. And so, I guess where my feelings are on that matter is that if you are still not an adult yet, even hormones have a certain element of permanence to them, a permanent effect, if especially depending on how long they're taken. So I guess
That's
my
exactly why a young trans woman would want that, though, right? Because she doesn't
exactly
want the effects of that testosterone,
right,
right? So,
and
like, how do
and
you?
that
Because how do you handle that? Because that is like you said, that's a permanent effect. That's not going away, right? Like
and that
the gravel in my voice is here because of the fact that I went through that first T puberty, right? So like,
yeah.
how do you like mitigate the fact that long term damage can be done through inaction or through like action in the case of like trans men?
So yeah, if the long-term damage comes from inaction, if if a teenager fully identifies with the gender that they feel they are, right, then affirming that, giving affirming care, hormones and things feels right and makes them feel right, and they'll be happier for as long as that's the right thing to do. But then I bring myself back to the possibility that what if they start hormones at 16 years old and it causes permanent changes, and then when they're 20 they decide, oh shoot, I never should have done that, but now they've been taking hormones for 4 years or whatever and had the effects on their bodies. So it's a real tricky thing to navigate whether this is going to stay or not. If it obviously, if the person's going to stay identifying that way forever, then living true to who they feel they are is the right thing to do so they can be happy and feel good about themselves. But then there's the problem in situations like mine where I thought I was going to be that way forever and I welcomed the permanent changes to my body, but then it changed. And so when it comes to teenagers, I want them to be the happiest they can possibly be and feel good about themselves. And if that means taking the hormones early on, then that's great on one hand, but still I recognize the possibility that because they're not fully formed yet, your brain doesn't fully form until you're like 25. And so to make such a decision that has permanent elements to it, I feel is really risky. And that perhaps the answer, like clearly in my case, the answer would have been better to convince me I wasn't actually trans early on before I did those things to myself. But you can't say, and that's where I have to be careful because I can't go around saying that nobody should ever transition, no teenager should ever be given hormones, because each person is their own unique experience. And
Yeah.
if that feels in every way right to you, I just recognize the potential that someday it might be realized that maybe I shouldn't have taken those hormones early on. And that is all I want my story to help people become aware of, is that possibility, not that you never should. The transition should never happen. It's a real tricky thing to navigate.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that. And I think one thing that sticks out that you've said is that, like, part of the reason why you felt so uncomfortable as a trans woman is due to how visible you were as one. Which is something that I feel anxiety about as well, even though I transitioned at a younger age, right? But, like, even with me transitioning at 20, there's still, like, there's testosterone effects. There's years of testosterone.
Yeah,
Um, but then, like you mentioned, maybe if you hadn't had if you weren't 26 when you learned about trans people is the way I'll phrase that. If you had been younger, right? Like maybe it would have been a different story. But then it seems like a lot of people want these teenagers to be forced into the same position as like you or me, right? So like I feel like this is a big catch 22 where it almost feels like they actually don't want trans people to be happy because they're unhappy when they're clockable and they get more clockable the longer they're on T.
Yeah.
specifically speaking about trans femme people, right? But like, do you get where I'm coming from there? So like, it feels weird when you're like, don't do anything, just cook on tea. But then also, if you cook on tea, you're gonna be more unhappy. So also on the same token, on the off chance that you're part of the like 2% that detransitions as like trans women, because I'm not speaking about trans men. I don't know enough about the stats about trans men, but I know
Yeah.
that most trans women don't detransition except for like societal hate. And why do they get societal hate? Because they are like visibly trans and people don't really like trans people. So like,
Yeah.
anyways, I guess all I'm saying is that sometimes it feels like people want trans people to be forced to deal with the hate, and they want to be able to like hate them, and that's the whole reason why they're like, no, I'm not gonna let my kid transition, not because they hate their kid, but like they don't want their kid to be some freak, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
um
Isn't it a really twisted thing that the majority of people that hate trans people or put out so much hatred towards them, if they were to become friends with someone that passed and they had no idea this person was trans, they would just
they,
accept
they
them.
they would be friends.
Uh-huh. But
They would have no clue.
someone that doesn't pass, oh, you that I've always called it the ew factor, or that's weird. Anything that causes someone to go, ew, what's going on here? That man is dressed like a woman. This weirds me out. I feel uncomfortable about this. And I that's within you. If you feel uncomfortable about it, that's because what you believe, and you believe it's wrong for this person to be presenting this way. Not
Everybody else is just a
actually.
mirror of how you feel. So if you feel
Uh-huh.
disgusted, it's in here, it's not over there.
Yes, totally.
um I am curious, I guess. Do you feel like people should live for the reactions of those around them? Or like the like, you know, should you not transition because you might give people the ooh factor, I guess is a way that I'm gonna phrase that. Because
That
you've said you've talked about this in videos before, so
yes.
I'm letting you know. I'm not saying this out of the blue. You have talked about this, so that's why I want to get your thoughts here so we can talk about it. Because I didn't really like your take in the video. I'm not gonna lie.
I can appreciate that. And if I could maybe clarify my position on that. So it is true that most of us trans people are when we live as trans persons, like I was, you do go out into the world, and you are living in a world that expects you to present a certain way. And not that that's right, but I think mostly what I was trying to get across is that that's a struggle that, like for me, when I realized it was a struggle every day, every time I go out in the world, I'm giving them that ooh factor. They're looking at me weird. Nobody ever interacted with me in a negative way, surprisingly. In all those years and all the places I went, I never had anybody tell me I didn't belong in that bathroom, or and certainly not because I was passing. But so I guess the fact is we do live in a world that expects gender norms and gender binaries, so it makes it difficult for someone trying to live comfortably in the world where that exists. But the fact is, everyone should be loving and open to any expression at all. So it's not, I don't want to say that you shouldn't transition or live out in the world as a man presenting as female or identifying as trans, because that's your own right. That's where you came from. We live in a world that we're free to be who we want to be. That's the beauty of this whole thing, that you can express yourself as trans, or
Yeah,
as
this is
anyways, or
America.
like, right. It's a land of the free, and dreams come true. And I guess what I just recognized that there are a lot of people out there that are very weirded out by the thing. And it's not that you should not put yourself in those spaces because it's weirding them out. They should get over themselves and get over what's causing them to be so weirded out. But the reality is that because so many people are weirded out, that's the world we live in, and we're going to be faced with that. So I like to try to just as make people aware that if you are going to go out in the world presenting that way, that's just something you have to expect. It's going to happen. and it's not a good thing. It shouldn't happen. People should just see another human being as another human being, regardless of how they present. But we live in a world that doesn't work that way, sadly. It's getting more and more. I love the
Because
fact.
the world is fluid, like you
Uh,
said, people
yeah,
are fluid, and the world is fluid, society is fluid. So I guess that's a follow up. Is do you think that making people kind of confront that ooh factor in their brains is forcing them to move forward, or like forcing them to advance mentally, for lack of a better term? I know that's not right, like the right like way to phrase that, and like a lot of people are gonna be mad at me in the comments for that one, but do you know what I mean?
I think I hear what you're laying down. I it And I think that's why we've gotten to where we're at now. It's because enough trans people have been in the world. It has become enough of a norm in the world that, yes, people have been forced to face this as they're confronted with it more often. Back years ago, when you, like for me, when I only saw one trans person in all like 30 years of life or whatever, when you're not around something, you're not exposed to something, you don't know how to handle it. And so I discovered going out in the past couple of years as my female self, most of the places I would go to, they would just treat me like normal. And that was, at first that was weird to me, because I was like, I expected to be treated weird and poorly, but I was just welcome and accepted everywhere I went, even into women's circles, women's healing circles. The people running the circle, the women running the circle would say, "Oh yeah, welcome." And now people tell me, you never belonged there, right, in the first place. Well, perhaps not, but I identified so fully that I was a female that I fully believed I did belong there. Yeah.
Do you feel like there were things you learned in those spaces that like helped you advance? Because that's one thing that I think a lot is like sometimes I even like agree with a lot of your takes of like maybe I wouldn't have even needed to have transitioned if I had learned what, if I knew what I knew now, maybe I didn't have to be trans, right? But matter is I am trans, I'm here, right? Like I'm in it. And at this point, you know, I've been building myself as a woman for more of my adult life than I was as a man. So it would be harder to like throw that away and rebuild everything. Anyways,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is like, do you feel that the things you learned there were like valuable enough to like outweigh, I don't know, I don't feel like it does a lot of harm for trans women to coexist with cis women in women's spaces, but like you have said that in videos occasionally. So I guess I'm curious if you feel like you've learned like valuable lessons that you're able to like then take on to other people, or like what's your relation with that now?
I, I guess it did cause me to sit there and kind of analyze myself in relation to the women that were there. And I did learn in being in women's spaces how loving and accepting women can be. Women were far more accepting of me in my trans identity than men were, by far. I
Mm-hmm.
would, yeah, I had lots of women acquaintances and things that fully welcomed and accepted me. And in those women's circles, I feel like I took away an understanding of some of the struggles that cis women are dealing with, as it compares to my own struggles as a trans woman and what I was feeling at the time and how I related myself to them, and being in their presence, feeling like, oh yeah, I belong here, this feels right. But at the same time, most of them had experiences where men had wronged them or raped them or harmed them physically, and I didn't have that. And so I couldn't
Yeah.
relate that way. And so it was an interesting thing to try to navigate psychologically. How much of me is a woman? How 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 much
I
do I
don't think
belong in
womanhood
there?
is built on sexual violence, though. I just want to
No,
clarify that
no.
not all women, I think it's the majority of them, but not all women do experience that. So would you say that they're less women or like less woman than other women that have done that?
No, I wouldn't think so. I, women, I mean, recently I went to a men's retreat, and part of it was initiating me as a man. And that in culturally, men have in history been initiated. Women tend to get their initiation through giving childbirth, and some women don't ever have children. And so, yeah, as far as defining what makes a woman, or at what point she becomes a woman or becomes initiated into womanhood, as opposed to a trans woman who was lived life as male and then tries to become a woman, and whether you can ever become the same as a woman who has always lived a woman, it's
Well, nobody's saying that it's the same experience, but it's like more similar, I guess. And like I feel like the more you live as a woman, the more woman experiences you get. Because I agree with you. Like I most recently watched your reacting to your coming out video. Um, and like in your coming out video, you say like, "Oh, you look at old pictures of me, and you know that you just need to say she, her." Like, and you're like, "No, that's a man. That was always a man." Blah blah blah. And like I agree with you that like well, okay, what I don't agree with is that man and woman are like stagnant, right? Like you said, people are fluid. You know, sometimes you will be a man, sometimes you will be a woman, sometimes you'll be a boy, sometimes you'll be a girl, right? Like these are all different social roles that mean different things, right? Like
right.
you're not born a man, you're born a baby, right? Like
Mhm.
babies are babies, they're not men. You're not a woman, you're a baby, and then you're a boy or a girl, which are both social, right? And like maybe you're lucky enough. Okay, that was another question I had. Sorry, I know I definitely just jumped on here, but do you think it would be beneficial to raise children as like people, like a gender neutral people, rather than boys and girls, of like making them feel different, making them feel separate?
I absolutely feel that I think it's only been in like the recent couple hundred years or something of human existence that we've so strongly felt this need to go man and woman and find out what the roles are, to define those roles. And when a kid, I often think of the concept that if you were born on an island and you had nothing whatsoever to influence you, you had no boys or girls to look at to compare yourself to, and you were born either in a boy's or a female body, you would grow up just being a person. You would have nothing to compare yourself to, no way to understand what the differences are between male and female because you've never been exposed to it. Whereas we live in a society where the instant you're born, you're either given a blue birthday cake or pink birthday cake, depending on whether you're boy or girl. You're given these toys that match your apparent gender, and I've always hated to see that. That always bothered me, especially when I was living as trans, because I thought that was absolutely criminal to assign a baby a gender before they told you what their gender was,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
like you're
how you
assigning
know.
their future. You're assigning the rest of their life for them.
Yeah. And I think that plays a lot into it when you start raising a boy like I was, because you are a boy, boys do this is how you do it. And then if there are any of those feminine feelings that come up, we are humans. I should have been able to express my femininity and it shouldn't have been a problem. And had I been
Yeah.
able to do that, I might have been just a Emmy man, and I might have felt okay with it without having to go full on surgery, get a vagina to feel like I'm fully woman.
Yeah, it's kind of like that like rubber band, right? Like you were pulled so hard one way that like you let
Yes.
go. Of course you're gonna shoot over there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because I feel like if we're as kids, if we're raised more just not necessarily gender neutral even, but just gender fluid, just express yourself how you want to and feel safe in doing so. And if we allow our kids to feel safe and one day acting like a boy, dressing like a boy, the next day acting, dressing like a girl, then they'll be able to just flow through that and
yeah.
express themselves and feel happy and safe in their own body. But
Do
when
you
we
think that? Sorry.
yeah, when we assign one or the other, and you will stay in this box, never get out of it, step out of that box, you're evil, you're bad, not good.
Do you think that could be a way for, like, I don't want to say the hateful adults in the world, right? And like, because it's that's the second thing. I don't even really like the kid versus adult distinction because it's just a legal distinction, especially in America. Because you know, never mind. I don't want to get into that. That's not here or now. But I don't like that we treat them so differently because kids are just little humans, right? And then adults are just bigger humans. But
Yeah.
anyways, do you think that taking a more like gender fluid approach, a more personhood approach, could be a like valuable strategy, I guess, for combating people that are coming at this topic with hate, that are coming at this topic with like with ulterior motives, I'll say, right? Rather than love and like trying to spread light and like joy, right? Like, do you get what I'm talking more about like the audience at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. So it's like I'm thinking the concept of like me as a detrans person making videos where I want to make it clear that there's male and female and you must raise your kids to align with that. I don't ever want to do that. I want to make it clear that kids should be free to express themselves however they feel. I do see the problem where a lot of the people that watch my videos comment and say, like, yes, you were a man, welcome back to reality and things. And then that again perpetuates this problem where as soon as a kid is born, we assign them a gender and we force that on them for their whole life until they either comply with it or go the other direction and abort it. I i yeah, i, I really don't think that it should be put out there in the world very strongly that you must adhere to one gender or the other. I have said in my videos that I recognize the fact is, as far as biology goes, we are either male or female biologically, but recognizing that internally our sense of self can be vastly different depending on our experiences.
And even our biologies are vastly different person to person, right? Like I'm pretty sure there's more variation between individual women and individual men, or like, you know what I mean, like women to women and like men to men. There's more variation there than between each other. So like
Yeah,
ultimately everybody is just unique, everybody has their own biology going on. So like I don't even like the concept of like sexes, right? Because like everybody is just different, right? And we're not in this like binary system, like you said, right? Like everybody is kind of just like, well, it is more like that, I think, but like
uh,
everybody's just unique.
yeah,
So I definitely agree with that.
yeah, yes. And I guess one of my points for mentioning the biology of male and female is like in the case of someone like me, when it did turn out that I reverted back to my biology, that was something that was there for me to fall back on. Like if I wasn't biologically male in the first place, then there wouldn't be that biological binary for me to have either gone female or male. And so now that I've gone back to male, I'm glad that it's that the binary is there so that I can say, okay, yes, I am a man. This is where I'm at. But at the same time recognizing I'm a human, not
Yeah.
necessarily. I can still express feminine. I still have a very feminine side that comes out sometimes, but and that's okay. Everybody should be free and should feel free. That's the real thing. You should feel free and safe to just safely express yourself, however, without feeling like people are going to be looking at you like you're some freak or something. Nobody wants to live like that. Everybody wants to just feel happy and confident in themselves and get to go out and enjoy their life and not have people look at them funny. And I hate that we live in a world where there is so much of this hatred and conservative trying to assign you to one binary or the other, regardless of what biology may be there. We are humans. We are very complex, and our psychology, our minds, works very separate from what our body is. Our body develops. So I like to see a world where everybody can just be loved and welcomed for whoever they are,
Yeah.
however they express themselves.
Do you identify more with humanhood or manhood? Or like humanness or manness?
That one has been a very interesting one to navigate. The only reason I've grasped onto the male identity or man identity is I definitely identify more as a human. Like as I would still love to express my feminine side here and there, but I did grasp onto the man identity because I guess mainly that does come down to my comfort level. Living in the world we live in and recognizing that people do look at me or looked at me as lesser when I was presenting female. There's parts of me that feel a lot safer and more secure and confident in the world now, having say, okay, I am a man and grasping onto that as my identity while still acknowledging that I'm a human.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a lot easier than having to deal with like I don't want to say discrimination because that always like trips people up in their brains. But dealing with just like people being weird because you're a trans person and they don't know how to deal with trans people. They don't know how to interact around you, right? So then
Yeah,
they're uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable. They're dismissing you because they don't even like you mentioned with your business transaction. You were like, "Oh, I just got dismissed," right? And like
yeah,
I imagine it does feel a lot safer to live as a man, which is kind of what goes back to the like detransition stats of like societal hate. There was like people were uncomfortable with me as a trans woman, so I detransitioned. Like, I just
yeah,
wanted to be. I want to feel safe. I don't want to feel like I'm being stared at. I don't want to like. Yeah. So I definitely agree. See where you're coming from with that.
yeah. I would never want to tell somebody, hey, you're going to make people uncomfortable if you dress like that, because that would be a shitty person.
Yeah.
I want to I want everybody to feel comfortable to express themselves however, but I do recognize that like someone like me who expressed myself as a female for years, all of a sudden have that switch and go the opposite direction, not necessarily the opposite direction, but to realize that I can live as a man and that one of the main reasons I wasn't able to begin with was because I couldn't accept myself or love myself as a man. And then I see that happen in so many cases, not just in the trans world, but in like any cosmetic surgery that someone has. Mainly, the only reason they're doing it is because they don't. I mean, that's the whole reason you have cosmetic surgery, because you don't like the way a part of you looks and you're trying to change it. But the awesome thing is when you realize that maybe I don't have to go through all these painful procedures that are so expensive and cause so much pain and suffering. If I could find it in myself to love myself the way I was born, it would save me from all of that.
Yeah.
But to each their own, everyone's on their own path. It's got their own unique experience.
Yeah. You mentioned. Well, you said the word conservative just a minute ago, so I don't think you were talking about conservatives, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Have you heard of Project 2025?
No.
It's crazy. It's this document that like I think it's the Heritage Foundation, which is a big like Republican group. They put it out,
Uh,
and it's essentially talking about how they're going to implement like a theocratic fascist dictatorship, and like it's not going to be a good time to be LGBTQ in any capacity. Um,
Yikes.
and and I wonder how things like that would impact detrans people, right? Like, um, well, ah, is it okay if I ask you a medical question?
Yeah.
What hormones are you on right now?
Right now, I am strictly on testosterone, but my wife helped me research what the best was because I didn't know when I detransitioned. I'm like, oh crap! Now I have to figure out how to put testosterone back in my body. And so we researched bioidentical hormones, which supposedly absorb more. They're more appropriate for your body. It absorbs better than some other forms of hormones out there. But the problem is there are these pellets that get stuck through a big needle into my back, instead of a testosterone injection, there are these pellets that go under my skin, and my body does not like them. Twice I've had them now, and there's still a big bulge under my skin where my body was trying to reject the pellets. And on the other side, it was like well over a month ago, I had those inserted, and that hole is still leaking out my back. It's not healed up.
Really?
It's yeah, it's quite the unfortunate side effect of having to supplement my body with testosterone. Now I have to deal with this. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna do the pellets anymore because my body clearly cannot handle them. There's
Yeah.
sublingual options that I can take, but yeah, I'm still working on that. Still working on trying to figure out my hormones now post detransition.
I would be curious to just gauge your thoughts on how the different hormones feel to you, if that makes sense. Like what does estrogen versus testosterone versus, like, I don't know if you took progesterone. I don't know what you took, right? So like
Mm,
what do these, like, what are the differences that you feel in all of these hormones?
Like the estrogen, it made me feel euphoric. It made me feel a lot more emotional. There were times where I would cry about things that made no sense, and that that felt good to me at the time because I thought, yeah, I'm an emotional woman. It's okay. It aligns. And the estrogen felt good. I guess the psychological aspect of it made me feel affirmed and amazing, like I was making steps towards my goal. And and that taking estrogen still felt good to me right up until I decided it was no longer good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went on testosterone, what happened was I realized that my body was suffering from all the estrogen and no testosterone at all. And then I realized that even cis females have a certain level of testosterone in their bodies. So I thought, well, for a better all around healthy condition, I need some testosterone. So I had them give me some testosterone in addition to my estrogen. And as soon as I did, I think it might have brought enough of my man feelings back online, having testosterone in my body again, that I think that could have played into my detransitioning because I realized I think it helps me feel more in my body as a man having the testosterone. And now it's been however long it's like 6 months, 6 or 7 months since I last had any estrogen in my body at all. It's just been strictly testosterone now. And I feel
Yeah.
a lot more energy, a lot stronger. I just feel overall a lot better. And
Yeah.
that that again, how much of that is the psychological aspect as opposed to actual physical effects on my body?
Yeah. Do you ever miss it? Estrogen.
No, not really. I guess there's certain feelings associated with it that I kind of miss. Like, but then again, like I said, I think that might have been psychological. That the psychological aspect of knowing I was taking female hormones that made me feel happier, and so I might kind of miss that feeling. But right now, I'm just perfectly content and happy with nothing but estrogen because of how I've come back to my male identity.
Yeah. Did you ever take progesterone in addition to the estrogen?
I I tried a little bit of topical progesterone. I guess that's typically how it's administered. But I I never noticed the difference with that.
Yeah, I had a pill and I didn't take it for like 2 years. I was just on my AA and my estrogen, right? And I noticed that I also felt really like, well, you didn't say this first part, but you said the second part. So I felt really in my head, if that makes sense. I feel like
Uh,
estrogen really like brings me up, and then
okay.
like the I feel like the progesterone brings me back to my body. So you
Uh,
mentioning that with the testosterone is really interesting to me because the first time I took it, I remember feeling like it very in my body. And I actually recently went. under an experiment where I stopped taking estrogen for a month, just because, why not, right? Just for fun.
Yeah.
But I wanted to track the way that testosterone made me feel, and I can't say I agree with feeling more in my body, but I also feel more like, or I'm the experiment's over at this point, and I'm retrying to get all my levels back in order. But um, I noticed that I also felt a lot more like manly with it, or like masculine, or like I think it was just confidence. Because testosterone is a steroid, and roiders, you know, I don't know. There's lore, right, that when bodybuilders are taking steroids, they're more aggressive, they're more like full of themselves, and like that is how I feel like I felt, which I think I associate with masculinity, which is just like a mental, like the way that I view it, right? But like I agree with you there in that, like, that I don't know, there is something about it that like makes you feel like a little more puff in my chest.
So did that bother you to feel that? Did it?
I I actually I haven't posted the video yet. It's taking a while to edit because I'm talking about a lot of personal things and like fluids and like all the things that come with it. So then I feel like uncomfortable talking about it on YouTube. But ultimately, I do the same thing. I just want to share my story with people and hope it helps, right? So like I think that there's pros and cons that I find with both an estrogen dominant hormone profile and a testosterone based hormone profile. Um, but I feel like the positives of the estrogen for me, well, estrogen and progesterone. If I don't take progesterone ever, it gets all wacky. I get too anxious. It's bad. But
too much.
yeah. And it's good to be in my body, and it's good to like be present, right? So I like to do that. But I think that while there are positives of testosterone, for me at least, in my experience, there's just too many negatives that like I mm, I don't mind feeling more confident, for example, or more full of myself, or more like I could handle somebody in a fight, right? Or like I don't want to say aggressive, but like a little.
You want to feel more masculine.
Yeah, and I don't mind that necessarily, but I don't think that's the way that I want to go through my life. That's not like the way that I want to interact with other people.
Yeah.
I like my temperament, I guess might be the right word, better when I'm on an estrogen based profile. Which again, I agree with you. People are fluid, and I've always kind of been open to the idea that maybe my transition is just for now, and I'll detransition at a later point, and I'm fine with that, right? And I'm making decisions with that in mind, um, because I don't know what the future brings. Like right now, it feels right for me, but maybe it won't always feel right for me. Anyways,
and that's what you do. You do what feels right now.
that's why I did my experiment, and I decided I don't want to be back on testosterone right now. But that's why I was curious what you like felt like. What were the differences when you were on these various things, especially because you had bottom surgery, which means you were like strictly, whatever you're taking. So like, it's easier to isolate all the variables.
Yeah, being in your head, I can relate to that one all on estrogen actually, because I I grew up my whole life believing my mind was my best friend. Growing up in a traumatic household, you you go internal a lot. You dissociate. You go into your own mind to save yourself from discomfort. And I grew up doing that. That my brain was where I went. My mind was immediately where I go. Anytime I was uncomfortable, I can be in, like for example, I could be in the middle of a mall and a shooting could break out, and I would just be perfectly calm, looking around, because that's what trauma does to you. It makes you so you can be in the most chaotic situations and just be perfectly calm because you had to as a child. You had to dissociate and go internal. When I was on estrogen, I spent so much time in my head, and it caused a lot of problems between me and my wife because I'm always hyperanalyzing everything she'd say and trying to think too much about everything. So coming on the testosterone now, it's like now that you said that, I can relate to that. But I'm way more in my body, less in my head going, which a lot of people would say that men are always in their head, and that is a masculine trait typically to try to calculate in your head all the time. But yeah, I've actually found that I'm more in my body now than ever.
Yeah, it would have been really interesting to know if I don't know much about the cream progesterone, but the one my doctor prescribed me is a pill that you can either take orally or rectally. Um, but it's bioidentical as well because that's
Uh,
the
yeah,
same issues with testosterone. If you don't take bioidentical, there's heart issues.
right.
Progestins are bad. Progesterone is good. Progestins are bad. Okay. Anyways,
Uh,
it would
I
have been really interesting to know.
still have a bottle of estrogen pills here.
Oh my gosh, me too. Yeah. But yeah, it would have been really interesting to know how that affected you. But of course, I can't ask you to do an experiment in the name of science. But
I'll,
if
I'll
you
go.
ever want to, I would love to know your findings.
I'll go back on estrogen for a couple months. See how things.
Uh, oh my gosh. Okay, let me ask some more of these questions that the community asked. Because I don't know how long you have, and I'm pretty free, but we've been talking
Yeah.
for 2 hours, and I know a lot of people don't just have all day. So let me see. Let me see. Um, would you do it again?
Which part? Or
Um, the she's actually or no, they're actually watching actively, so they can elaborate if I'm wrong. But I think just transition, just like the whole journey, the 6 years. Yeah,
there were a tremendous amount of lessons I learned in the whole process, and I became a far more healthy, rounded person overall because of the whole thing. And that's an interesting question because like if I were to able to go in a time machine back to 2017 when I started hormones, knowing what I know now, I definitely would not do it again. But
that's not how life works.
yeah, exactly. But knowing the incredible happiness it brought me, like that, when I woke up from surgery, my biggest fear was that I would wake up from surgery and have the doctors tell me, "We're sorry, we ran into complications, we had to abort the surgery." I would have gotten so suicidal in that moment. I would I was ready for that to happen to me, but I was so happy when I woke up and saw the surgery actually happen. And so knowing the incredible sense of happiness it brought me at the time, I guess going back, I would do it again, but not knowing what I know now. So yeah,
Would you think you would have been able to, I don't know, fix it with like knowing what you know now? Do you think you would have been able to fix this like dysphoria that you felt? Because earlier you mentioned that, or well, I don't know if it was earlier or in a video I watched earlier. Because again, I've kind of been binging your content. But I feel like, well, it's kind of the lenses thing that you always talk about, right? Like, if you have that lens and that's how you feel about yourself, there's really, at least I think, there's not really anything you could say that would like unconvince you of it. Because ultimately, you're still gonna say, no, that's how I feel. Like, that's what I am, right? So, but anyways, I would like to hear your answer. I don't want to answer for you. I'm just saying like what I think you're gonna say based on what I've heard you say in the past.
people ask me quite often. That's one of the questions they ask me is myself personally. Is there anything I could have told myself back then to help me realize that maybe I didn't need to transition? And and that's a question I've been trying to mull over in my mind a lot. That, but to answer the question, knowing now what I know and knowing how identity forms in a person, as much as I do, I'll never know everything, but I know as much as I do, as much as I've researched and learned in all the things my wife and I are into, in what forms a person's identity. I do believe now that I have the understanding that I could go back to my younger self and convince him that this is only temporary. This is a belief you developed because of your childhood traumas. And yes, it feels so real right now. It feels so real that you're willing to go have this surgery. But a few years from now, it's all going to change because you're going to realize that it was all program and program beliefs from your childhood. Whereas at the time, I fully believed I was born that way. Had I known at the time that I wasn't actually born that way, then I probably would have questioned whether it was actually a good thing to have a permanent surgery done to my body based on a temporary belief. And, but then that brings up the question again: is if I was to be presented with someone struggling with gender identity issues now, would I be able to help them navigate that? And I don't know, because everybody's different. And I myself, had anybody come at me back then and said, I'm gonna help you get through this, you don't have to transition, I would have said, fuck you, get the hell out of my space. I want
Yeah.
nothing to do with your negativity.
So you think you would be able to talk to your younger self, but do you think your younger self would have listened to you?
If my younger self knew it was my older self, possibly, but how would I have known that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious if you still would have transitioned or taken hormones, just no surgery, had you like understood this more. Because I imagine you still
Uh,
wanted to explore your femininity. You still wanted to explore this side of yourself.
that's a good question, because yeah, I I probably would have transitioned and explored that femininity because I felt like I had to, for one, being told my whole life that for all of eternity you're a boy and you always will be. I Transition does allow you to experience a different way to experience, especially if you identify with being female. It gives you that opportunity to experience that, and experience is everything. You,
It's the lenses.
yeah, without the experience, you can't fully know. No, just like a man can't say what he knows, that he knows what it's like to be a woman because he's never lived that experience. Whereas trans people, we get to say, actually, I did get to live that experience. It might not have been fully as a woman, but it was enough that I got the experience where now I feel like, yeah, I experienced what that's like to be a woman. It felt right at the time, and then there came a point where it felt not right anymore.
Yeah. I feel like you are able to see so many lenses and it, at least for me, I feel like so many things clicked into place that I didn't understand like as a guy. And then like living as a girl, as a woman, I'm not a girl, I'm a little too old for that. But um living like as a feminine person, I've like learned the other side of so many dynamics that I just didn't understand before. And I feel like when I look at social interactions, and like you mentioned with you and your wife doing the therapy, right? Like you both have such deep insight into relationships, into people, because of all these different places that y'all have like clicked in. So like would you agree that it like, I don't know, you get so many more lenses. That's really just the way that I feel. Like you get,
Yeah, I really feel that someone who has transitioned and then detransitioned does have additional lenses through which we're looking at life, gained new perspectives, new experiences that most people don't get to have. And that's one crazy thing, is to recognize whether I should have gone through it or not. Everybody could bring morals into it. I hate when people try to push their morals on me.
me too, because it's all religious. It's all
Yeah,
religion.
and it's all based on somebody's idea of a belief that they developed at some time. When we are human beings that are ever evolving, changing, and growing, you can't assign a rule to all of humanity and expect that to stick. That's not what we are as humans on this earth. And I'm trying to remember what you asked.
Um,
If you
I
did.
kind of just I think you answered it. I kind of just asked it if, well, I told you that I feel like I've developed a bunch of lenses that help me look at
Oh,
social interactions and social dynamics between like men and women. And then I asked, well, then I brought up you and your wife and how like y'all do the couples therapy. And then I asked if you would agree or disagree, but I was kind of just like, again, it's more conversational style. I don't know. These aren't
Yeah.
scripted. I'm going off the cuff here.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah, so
that's great.
I think you answered that. So I can ask another community question here. Let's see. Let's see. Um. Oh, it looks like the would you do it again question. I also said what is the it here, so we had the same response on that one. Um. Okay. That person is incorrect. Okay, well, I'll ask it anyway because not everybody knows your lore. Would you say that you were never trans?
Mhm. Now, I get a lot of people now telling me I was never trans because I get they tell me I wasn't truly transgender or I would still be living that way. But if you were to, and one of my purposes in making my videos and showing my past videos is to show that I'm saying all of the same things that most other trans people are saying when I was identifying that way. I fully believe that I was just as trans as anybody else. And I believe that trans is an identity, and therefore my identity was that I was a female. So I had the trans identity. Whereas then when I realized I should go back to living as my male identity, now I say I'm not trans, but it could be argued that I still am trans. I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't. I would say I definitely was transgender as far as the definition and things go. Some people like to tell me, "Well, you never went to therapy." Yes, I did. I went to a lot of therapy. The therapist definitely told me I was trans. Told me I had dysphoria. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I figured because you say that in like every video, every single video, you bring up that people say that in the past. Okay. Um, we've kind of already done those. What do you think should be okay, what do you think should be done in terms of regulations and why? So like legal regulations like the government. What should the government be doing as comparison to like the you know what I mean? Like wait, what should they be doing?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I I have very interesting ideas about the government. I I think the government was put into place years ago to protect people's money, and therefore it has grown into such a massive dominating force that it's very unfortunate how much the government wants to put their little grimy mitts into our bedroom and into our personal lives. And I don't think that any regulation whatsoever should exist. But there does come the problem where a lot of us people don't know how to keep ourselves in line, I guess. So there has to be guidelines and things. But I always go back to the analogy of being born on an island where no government existed. You would just figure it out yourself. You would be a free human being. We happen to live in a society where now there do exist all these hospitals and medical systems and things where there is the potential for kids to have surgical intervention and things because it exists, because the hospital exists, and because the there's organizations that say surgery and things is the answer for a kid that has gender identity issues. And so then we run into the issue of somebody needing to regulate something to keep people from damaging their kids. But at the same time, like I said, should there really be regulations? Should that really exist? It's hard to say. In today's day and age, with things the way they are, I guess there are parents out there that would just go take their kids to have surgery. They probably exist, and therefore, in those cases, there it might be necessary to have some regulation in place to stop that from happening. But then again, I think it should be up to the individual to decide. Too often we have individuals that don't have the mental capacity to truly make the decision for themselves. It's a real, again, a real tricky situation when you start bringing in government regulation into something that's about people's personal lives, like abortion. And how is it the people who fight against abortion do so by saying that's a human being,
It's
it's not
immoral.
yours. Yeah, again, morals bringing in, and you could analyze that all day long. But what's right and what's wrong,
And nobody's ever going to agree. There's too many people to always agree on like what's right and wrong, what's moral and immoral. Like it's a
so
waste of time.
yeah. But I I guess to simplify the question and simplify the answer, the fact is we do live in a world where these systems are in place that we are subject to, and and maybe certain regulations are necessary to keep us from harming ourselves and our kids. But at the same time, I was one of the ones that fought against gatekeepers at the time when I was wanting my hormones and surgery. Like, you gatekeepers step out of the way. This is something for me personally. I am an adult. I can make this choice myself. But if I was a confused parent of a child that maybe I thought that was the right path to take, I could see, or maybe I might fall into the trap of thinking I was doing the best thing for my kid, because as parents, we all want to do the best for our kids, and we don't always know what that is. And then sometimes the government wants to step in and tell us what that is, whether that's right or wrong, or what we should or shouldn't do with our kids. And again, I just don't think there's any real place for government regulation. But we happen to live in a world and system where,
We live in a society.
yeah, it's almost necessary. I don't know.
Yeah. So that you've only mentioned like kids and surgeries. So other than that, you really don't think there's any need for regulations in this area,
Like for hormones for
or
kids,
for adults. Like you've only mentioned kids and surgeries. So like I'm curious if that's the extent of where you think these regulations should lie, or like
I I think my feelings are when something results in a permanent change. So like surgeries, that does make a permanent change to the body. So where someone wants to do a permanent change to them, then maybe there's a place for regulations to stop a permanent change from happening. Like in my case, had I been a kid that transitioned and done, I don't know, I didn't go through that. I didn't experience what that was like to transition early.
yeah.
So
So like regulations against testosterone, but like estrogen is more gradual generally. So like you're gonna know. I don't know. I'm not gonna say you're gonna know if you dislike it, but there are people that start it and then a month or two in, they're like, "This isn't right for me. I'm
yeah,
done with this."
and
Um,
that's great. They explored that.
yeah, yeah, and that's
But
always
yeah,
that's what I always tell people is I think exploration is the best thing you can do because nothing I can say can tell you if you are or aren't trans. The only thing that'll
right.
help you is living it and knowing if you are overall liking it, overall disliking it, exploring it, right? Thinking about it, living it, developing
Yes.
your own lenses and things like this.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think people deserve the freedom to explore generally. People, I don't know, this is a free country. This is America. Not everybody that watches me is American, but if you're watching my channel, this is America. So,
Yes. Yeah.
anyways,
I'm fully of the opinion that when it comes to your body and your personal choices, if you want to have cosmetic surgeries, hormones, whatever, then go for it. And and even as like I recognize when it causes a lot of depression in young people when they have a different gender identity, but they don't have the freedom to express that. And so if we have government coming in and telling you no, you cannot do that, then that just causes more internal struggles because
okay. On this point, in a way, I see psychiatrists as like a hand of the government, right? Because the
No.
government tells psychiatrists and a lot of therapists what they can and cannot say, right?
Mhm.
And on that same token, remember how I said I don't like that we like divide kids and adults, right? I think parents are also used by like as a from a hand of the government to enforce things on their children, right? So
Yes.
in that same way, the parent is like a child's government. So I agree with you, but on that point where you don't think governments should like banish things, right? Because it just like it can ruin it. It could if they sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. If the government stops exploration, it'll have negative effects for that person, right? So like I guess that is kind of what I was trying to hit on earlier, where I was like, how do you manage this when you have a teenager, right, who has this belief in their head, and like you said, you started having those beliefs at 3 or 4 years old, which is really like way before even the earliest hormonal changes are like 12, 13, 14, right? It's not like you're
Right.
doing this to a 4 year old, but like they've had this idea in their head for at least 10 years, 5 years, right? Like it's been a while.
Uh,
It's been a minute. Even if they haven't shared it with you, they've been thinking about it. They've been pondering over it. So like
yeah.
how do you manage this like desire for exploration and also deal with the oppressive government in the analogy that is saying like I support you, but I'm going to make you stay as you feel like you're miserable. Anyways,
That, I guess that brings up a thought to my mind, whereas if a child was never told there existed female hormones that they could take, would they want it? And
you're an example of this.
well, yeah, just I grew up where that just wasn't even. I felt like it was a girl, but it was never an option for me. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't even know that was a possibility. And had I known it was a possibility, I probably would have been like, "Yeah, give me that." But for the most part, kids who grow up in today's society, they grow up with these like typical children issues, teenagers especially. We all were teenagers at one point, and we know how difficult it is to get through those years and feeling good about ourselves. And but if you're a struggling kid and then you find out, oh, there's these hormones I can take that'll make me feel better, then you're gonna want that, and then that creates the situation where now now you know it exists, you know it's going to make you feel better. At least you've been told by all the videos on the internet. That's what happened to me. I looked on YouTube and watched all these trans girl videos and how happy they were to take their hormones. And so by the time I popped that first pill, I was already primed for the psychological aspect of what it was going to do to me because I was made aware of it. But if a kid grows up and struggles with their typical child issues of feeling insecure and things and never knew that there was the possibility of transition or hormones, they might never grasp towards that and therefore never need to be diverted away from it.
It's
I,
interesting you say that when you're literally an example of someone who wanted it even
well,
without any knowledge of it. So I don't want to call you contradictory, but it feels a little contradictory that you do that, and also you're a literal example of what you're saying.
yeah, yeah. I feel that sometimes I do tend to contradict myself, but yeah, it's just such a tricky subject because everybody is so unique. Everybody's on their own path, and because we are all looking through the specific lenses of our experiences, not someone
Yeah.
else's, each person is really so vastly unique that you can't assign one person's what's right for one person to someone else. Like me, I try to be careful in my videos not to imply that what's right for me is the same for everyone else. Although I say and I recognize that I believe that gender identity is formed the same in everyone in their own frequency, their own flavor of gender identity, but that it's formed through experiences, just different
And I
experiences.
agree with you on that 1,000,000%. But a lot of people, I hate to talk about gender stuff because everybody assumes I mean like trans stuff, right? But like cisgender people, I that's the other thing. I don't even like the term transgender and cisgender because again, I think we're all just people. The same way
Yes.
I don't think the like male and female is like valuable is because we all are just individual. We all have unique biology. We all have
Uh,
unique like identity, right? So like I hate talking about identity because everybody always thinks I mean trans stuff, but I don't. Even cis people have identities and identity formation. Oh my gosh.
yes.
Oh
That
my
is
gosh.
that is something that I became so aware of too, is that every person, whether it's gender identity, your just your personality, your identity as a human, is I would have a completely different personality had I been raised in a different household, a different
Yeah.
country. And s-
Even 10 years later, if you were born in a different time by the same family, they would be
yes,
different, you would be different, everybody would still be different. Maybe you didn't even meet your wife or because you're both different, right? And
yeah,
like in a different world, we all live different realities because we
mhm,
are I don't know. I like to think there's some part of it that's a little bit biological, but the vast majority of it is things that you're primed for based on your childhood, based on your like experiences, right? Like the things you
right.
learn, the things that you were like familiarized with. So
Uh,
I agree with you there. I definitely a million percent agree.
Yeah, I grew up basically being taught, like I said, not only was I taught that I was created male in the pre existence before this earth, but I've also taught it that my personality, my identity was formed in the pre existence. And therefore, that, that gave me this idea that when I was born on this earth, my personality and identity is immutable. It's part of my genetics. It's my brain is where my personality is. But
Yeah,
the more I've learned about psychology and the formation of people's identity, the more I've realized, oh, actually, the same person being born in two different places and at different times, like you said, would result in a totally different personality and sense of identity. So when we do bring that into gender identity, it makes it, I guess, it kind of demystifies a little bit what happens in a person to cause them. Like I realized growing up, being in a household where men were so degraded and things that I had no choice as a child to conclude that this was my reality, that I must be a female trapped in a boy's body. And regardless of where that actually came from, the fact is I arrived at a place in my life where I felt like that was my reality and I needed to do what was necessary to make myself happiest in that reality and that
yeah.
identity.
I wonder if there or I this is not an I wonder question. This is an I'm curious. I'm curious if you think that sorry, I'll context first. A lot of the time when people are responding negatively to trans people online, right? That it's the it's YNBAW, you will never be a woman or whatever, right?
Mm,
They're like you were born a man, you'll always be a man. It's this idea of like kind of this immutability, like you just said, you're born, your identity, your future is locked in. A lot of them are very deterministic in the way that they view the world, right? But I guess
yeah.
I'm curious if there were any major events or insights that you gleaned that like I don't want to say broke you out of that, but like helped you crack that egg of like, oh, maybe my identity isn't set in stone for like my whole life. Maybe that wasn't something that like I'm confined to for eternity, right?
Yeah, I think there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der
I've
Kolk.
read that one.
I love that book. That book helped me, it opened my mind to the concept of identity and why we become who we think we are based on experience. Because like I said, I just grew up believing you either are who you are or you're not. I didn't realize how much of my life experiences went into forming what I became as an adult. And once read, when I read that book and became aware of other teachers, other psychology teachers and things, it, it really made me aware of the fact that our identity is not innate to who we are. I mean, it becomes that way. Obviously, your identity becomes your identity, and it becomes who you are, and it becomes almost rigid in stone and so hard to change because it's formed out of complex sequence of events. And
Yeah.
so you can't just change it all of a sudden. People like to say, well, just go be a different person, just make the decision. And that's that's available to you to make the decision to just be a different person.
But it's a
But
process to actually become that other person.
yeah,
It's like a slow curve. It's not a 90-degree angle. It's like a 2 degrees, and then you just slowly go.
right. Yeah. The programming takes a long time, deprogramming takes a long time.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let me ask you a couple more because there's a few more in here, and then I have a couple more questions for you, but then I won't hold you forever because
All right.
we're getting there. But okay, what is the worst part about being detrans?
For one, now having the permanent effects of being trans, being detrans, but I don't know if that's probably not the real context of the question. The worst part's being, well, I can't really identify anything that's bad about being detrans because it feels like after going through the whole experience of being trans and everything, I've now fallen back into a place where I feel secure in the world and happy to be where I'm at. But
Yeah,
yeah, I have to struggle knowing that I have permanent changes to my body that will never. And so trying to identify as a man now, part of being a man is having penis. Part of what helps you feel like I'm a man. So even walking is the weirdest thing that even walking through a store or something, I carry myself differently because I don't have that part of my male anatomy, and it's the weirdest thing. It's very uncomfortable to.
yeah,
I have to use bathroom stalls all the time. Can't ever use the urinal. Just wish I saw videos by Transwoman before saying basically the same thing. If you force me to use a male bathroom, what am I going to do with this urinal? It's the same thing. You don't have the parts, whether you're trans or detrans. It's an unfortunate experience.
yeah, yeah. That does make sense as like a very obvious biggest worst part there. Um,
Falling back into life, that was easy. It was almost like the people that were looking at me funny for being trans now just look at me like, welcome back to reality. And like they accept me more now than they did while I was trans.
yeah. Is that hard for you? That like I don't know, like seeing how they treated you before and then how they treat you now?
My dad, for example, when I detransitioned, first thing he did was let me pay for you and your family to go to Hawaii with us. We're gonna fly you to Hawaii. And I sat there for a minute like, are you doing that just because I detransitioned? And that that bothered me because like I said, I'm a loving person that accepts everyone, and I would expect other people to accept everyone as well. Like, you should be just as willing to fly me and my family to Hawaii while I'm trans as detrans, because doing that,
Because you're still his kid. Like
yeah,
you're yeah.
that directly invalidates my trans identity as if, oh, welcome back to reality now. Now we'll treat you normal. And and so yeah, when I go out in public and I see people that treat me better now that I'm normal in their eyes, I'm like, but wait a minute. I was still a human when I was dressing as female. Why one thing I did really appreciate is I work almost every day at a local coffee shop that is owned by some conservative Christians, and I
Mm-hmm.
worked there through my whole transition for years. And they all welcomed me and were all nice to me and would bring me free coffee and things. And that was incredible. That was an awesome opportunity as a trans person to be so loved and welcomed in such a
Yeah.
conservative Christian space. And now that I detransition, they're all still just as loving and friendly to me. So that is not one of those situations where I saw them change. They stayed just as loving and accepting of me all throughout.
Yeah. That's actually really nice to hear. Actually, I don't know. There's something about it that you would have the like idea in your head that like a super conservative Christian people would be kind of the people that are like weird about it.
Exactly.
But
Yep.
I guess they're actually following like the word of Christ, right? Because isn't like the actual Bible like love
Yeah.
your neighbor, love everybody, like treat everybody as if you would as if they were your own like child. Um,
Yep. That's the
so
real Christian way.
yeah, so shout out to those Christian people that treated you like a person both ways.
Yeah. They're great people.
Yeah. Okay, and then let me see. Are you embarrassed about it, or are you proud to know who you are this time for real? Or you can answer that however you want. I just read it off of the screen, so the phrasing might be a little, but
I I did go through a period of a lot of embarrassment where I was that was on the day when I realized I had to transition or detransition. That was one of the things that came up for me. It was like, oh shit, how am I going to do that? Everybody knows me as a woman now, especially I've been living here in Colorado Springs for 9 years now. And for 6 of those years, I was a woman. And so most of
yeah,
the people I know in this town knew me as a woman. So and like my dentist too, I I detransitioned and I went back and he was the first one that I told this is kind of embarrassing to be showing up now in a different role and he said, oh, don't be embarrassed about it. We're all humans. He was Mormon himself. Now he's not anymore. I think I
yeah,
might have helped him on that. But yeah, it's been fascinating to experience that, the embarrassment factor to realize, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't have done that whole thing. What does that say about me? But now months after the fact, I've finally settled back into where I can just be happy and confident and proud of who I am now and not feel super embarrassed about that. Because why should I be embarrassed about it? It was where I was at, just like any trans person. When that's where you're at, that's what
just
makes you feel good about yourself.
just like any person in general, right? Like I know a lot of cisgender people, right? Because everybody likes to make it likes to act like only trans people ever do anything to explore, right? But so many
Yeah.
cis people go through various experiences. Some change their names. Some take hormones. Like steroids are a
Mm.
thing. People do take testosterone. As like again, I'm speaking about cis men, but like there are so many things that are just to figure out how you relate to these experiences so much more. And I'm glad that there's people like that dentist that are like, we're all human, you did your thing, and you that's where you were then, this is where you are now, like you're good, like let me clean your teeth.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in a household where my mom, the number one thing she would always talk about is what other people are thinking about her. When me or my sister would do something, what are people going to think about me as a mom now? And that was always what she was worried about. So I
It's
took
always
that
about
on.
her, yeah.
I took it on to always be worried. What are people thinking about me? And so when I transitioned the first time, I was so scared to death to go out in the world thinking everybody was going to be judging me and thinking negative things about me. And I was so pleasantly surprised to discover that wasn't actually the case. They were thinking things about me, I'm sure, but people were saying things to me, and that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of think of that as like, out of sight, out of mind. I don't care if you talk about me, do it behind my back though.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me see. What does being a man versus being a woman mean to you?
uh, for the Before I transitioned, that was a question I used to ask myself all the time. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it I felt like I was woman inside, but I tried. I would hyper analyze, of course, every woman I would see. How is she walking? How is she behaving? What does it feel like to be her? And now I'm in a place where I recognize that gender roles, gender norms shouldn't necessarily even be a thing. They shouldn't be pushed on anybody. But I
Personhood.
find, yeah, personhood. You should be a person. But I
Yeah.
do find myself in a world that has a system in place that recognizes that men look, act, and behave a certain way, and men or women act and behave a certain way. And so now I identify as a man, for whatever that means, but I'm still open to my fluidity of expression. And so I refuse to say, well, I'm a man now that does not do these things, and this is what it means now to be a man. I'm a man biologically, but as far as my feelings and expression goes, I don't know that I would say. Yeah, I say I'm fully man biologically, but I'm not fully. Nobody's fully anything.
Because
It's
we're all
all
different. We're all just
yeah,
unique.
yeah. So, so who's to say one man is the standard that everyone else should align with?
Yeah. Yeah. I am curious, and I apologize if this is out of pocket, but I was, you know, do you identify with being a eunuch at all?
I've heard people throw that term out there. I'm not exactly familiar with
So,
what it.
like, those are the people that get their they get their like a neutered dog is like, or like a spayed dog, they're like eunuchs, but like historically these were people that were working in the court, so they would snip them so that they wouldn't have relations with the women that they were working with. Well, that's the lore, at least that's what we say today based on people 100 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, but like, so who knows how accurate it is all I'm saying. But as like, there are people without gonads, generally male born, desexed is the way I'll phrase it.
Huh. Well, I guess now being identifying as a man and not having my sex organs, I guess that may align. I and like right up until I detransitioned, I fully believed I was a woman. So now I just happen to be in a male body that has been surgically altered based on that previous identity that doesn't exist anymore. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense. I was just curious because I was reading about it earlier, and then like, in like a biological sense, you would kind of align with this idea of a eunuch, even though it's not quite for the same reason as like historically accurate eunuchs. So I was just
yeah.
curious if that was something you had thought about.
Now, my Mormon religion made me think sex was so bad I did away with the sex organs.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see. Where some of these are hard because they like they're like, where would you be now if you did not transition? But I kind of asked that earlier, and you're like, I don't know. Maybe I'd be happy as a man. Maybe I wouldn't be happy as a man.
That's the thing. They say hindsight is 2020, but when you can't see,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't,
we don't have foresight. We only have hindsight.
yeah, I don't know where I would have been. That is a really good question. I have thought a lot about that one because who knows? And also depending on what I had been exposed to recently, who knows if I hadn't had the awakening to detransition or whatever you want to call it. It's all about we are such complex receivers of information and we interpret everything that's brought in. And depending on where we're at, we might take something and interpret it entirely different at a different time in our life too. So there's even my detransition, had I not been exposed to the right sequence of things like my IFS training that made me aware that gender identity may be a part in that adaptation, had I not been exposed to that at just the right times, I might still be living as a woman right now, still fully happy in that identity.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Okay. Um, okay, I'm just gonna read this one. I almost guarantee it's not gonna make any sense, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Detransmaxing slash regret maxing, detransitioning or claiming to detransition for better social treatment and gain sympathy from transphobes like Corinna Cohn or Richie Heron. I don't know who either of those people are. Does partial or full social detransition no, is partial or full social detransition worth it if you don't really mean it permanently or until FFS while on E? And that's the whole question. So if that made sense to you, please answer. Otherwise, I don't even know how to translate.
I think I think it does make sense to me for the most part. Um, you read the first part, just like the
Yes.
first.
Yes. Um, detransmaxing slash regret maxing, detransitioning or claiming to detransition for better social treatment and gain sympathy from transphobes. Oh my gosh, I actually do know. There's like this. There's a couple creators that are like, oh, I detransition, but then they're like, but I'm still on estrogen.
Oh, yeah,
But like they do it for the attention, or yeah, they're doing it to like gain that sympathy, gain that audience without actually like committing to it. If
like
that makes sense.
yeah. I didn't understand what transmaxing was till I saw Buck Angel's video about it. I had no idea what in the world that was, and I'm most certain that wasn't me. I wasn't doing it to get better social interaction, and I didn't detransition to make my life more comfortable either. I do mention that that was an aspect, that was a part that made me realize, well, if I detransition, life would sure be a hell of a lot easier in this world. That was a part of it, but that wasn't the motivating factor. The motivating factor was me genuinely returning to feeling like a man again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And Buck Angel's transmaxing video, my friend was actually mentioned in it. Her name is
Oh,
Her name's Tina. She's watching this right now. Um, yeah. So I just thought that was interesting that you mentioned that. I personally don't think Buck Angel covered that one very well because it's kind of like it's a very niche like micro community in the internet. So it's not
seems
it,
like
it it's hard for outsiders to understand, and they often make a lot of assumptions, and then they stigmatize people, because we don't need to get into it, but people like to stigmatize things they don't understand is all I'll say.
totally. Yeah,
Okay, how do you oh no, not how do you support trans people even if you yourself turned out to not be one?
absolutely. I most definitely do. I have trans acquaintances. My wife's best friend is trans, and I love all people and I support all expressions. Like I said, that where it gets tricky for my opinions on the matter is when I say things like that, knowing that it can change, that it is unfortunate to do permanent changes to your body. But if that's where someone's at, if that, like for me, like I said, nobody could have talked me out of it. And I'm not going to say that anybody should ever try to talk people out of it either, because then that presents a problem where you might say things that offend them. It's a real challenging thing to navigate. Sure, if you said the right thing, you might maybe make them decide they don't want to make permanent changes to their body, but that's not for me to decide. That's not for me to try. It's you're on your own path. Every trans person has their own unique
Yeah,
experience.
and you don't
And
know where people are going to end up. Like maybe they would have like enjoyed, or not, maybe enjoy is the wrong word, maybe they would have like found peace with those changes, whereas somebody else could be the opposite, right? So like
yeah,
I definitely see what you mean there of
and
like
I greatly admire
don't beat them
trans
over the head.
people. Yeah, I greatly admire trans people because it is not the most comfortable thing to experience, to live in a world where you feel wrong in your own body. And so I give love and support to those who feel that way. And I want everybody to just feel like they're safe to be themselves, not that they're going to be judged and looked at like they're doing something wrong or weird. It just sucks that we happen to live in a world that is the way it is, that people do look at you weird, and I wish they didn't, but I
Do you
guess what
think it's? Oh, sorry. No, please finish, and then I'll remember. But it's related to something you just said, so
okay.
please
Yeah, I
finish.
was just thinking as far as helping kids to lovingly prepare them to know that if you do go out presenting differently, you do live in a world that's sadly going to look at you different, and just to prepare them for that mentally, not to try to discourage them from it necessarily, but more to prepare them for the state of our societies. Yeah.
Do you think that we're like moving to a better place as a society, like for people to like have their freedom in public? Um, like just for example, one like what my brain tells me is that like in the past, the standard in America at least was to be like a regular straight white couple who has like five kids in a single family home, like the nuclear family, like that was the ideal, right? Which so many people didn't fall into, including like people of color. Native Americans are technically people of color, but I'm gonna give them their own special shout out because we really fucked them over. Not me personally. America
Yeah,
fucked them over. Um,
my relatives,
yeah,
sadly.
gay people, other queer people. There's been so many groups in America that were not part of this like standard, and I would say that we're widening it, right? But like ultimately, trans people are still not really inside of it. Gay people are still like they're kind of on the fringes of it, but like they're still not super inside of it, but they're also not super outside of it at the same time. But like I feel like we're moving to a place where we're more accepting of like the freedom of individual choice, for lack of a better term, rather
Yes,
than like a moral based society. And I'm curious about your opinions on it.
I definitely would agree with that. And I've watched as religion has evolved over the years. Our country sadly was founded by these people that were so stuck on this religious idea, and therefore as they were founding the country, all the laws and things were formed around these moral ideas. So our country originally initially was very moral driven, and now, like you said, it is amazing to watch that we have evolved to where people are way more open hearted, more kind towards each other, and see that this religious, this fixation on this moral values taught by religion is not the standard anymore. It's not the way to live. People see all the hatred that's involved in us in becoming so fixated on this religious belief and morals. And we do luckily live in a world where it is far more accepting nowadays of varying expressions or individual personal choice with things. Like even trans issues aside, just in general, life issues, we as individuals are given more space, it feels like, to be humans, to be people, not to be
Yeah.
so controlled by the morals, like even sex. Like not too long ago, I guess in certain places it was still illegal to have sex outside of marriage, but everybody does it anyway
Or like
because,
sodomy laws.
yeah, yeah, like why?
Why do you care what I'm doing in a bedroom?
Uh, it's none of your business.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
So yeah, that's good to hear, I guess. And then I have the most important question of all of the day, right? This one's a doozy, so I hope you're ready. But how do you drink your coffee?
I love vanilla lattes. We've got our own espresso machine, but yeah, I regular milk, cow's milk.
What kind? Whole milk or 2% or 1% or skim?
We actually get a raw milk share. We
Mmm.
we had to buy into a share because in Colorado, in order to get raw milk, it's illegal to sell it unless you have a share in the farm. So we had to actually go visit the farm and buy
Yeah.
a share into the farm, get the raw milk. But raw milk has not been over pasteurized and everything, and it still maintains a lot of its quality. So we have less intestinal issues and things drinking it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
really cool. My mom used to do the same thing, and like she would go pick up, the raw milk in like this like weird looking container.
uh,
Yeah, it was yummy though. I is that like one of those things that also like once a month or something you also pick up a bunch of food as well. Like you like buy into like it's like a farmer's shit. Oh, I forgot what the word is. It's like a you. Do you know what's
this
the word I'm looking for? Do you know?
I think I'm familiar with, and I believe there are farms around here to do that.
It's
This
not the
one,
same thing though.
we just did the milk.
Cool. Cool. Okay. And then I guess my last question. Well, I'm gonna ask about your book, and like, yeah, I want to give you a chance to like, promote yourself. You know how to do it. But
Yeah.
so like, yeah, what's the deal with your book?
So yes, my book. I started writing it like over 4 years ago, and obviously back then I was identifying fully as female. So what my book originally was about was my experience growing up trans in a Mormon world, being in the Mormon church. And that was what the whole book was going to be about. This was my life experience. This is what I went through. And now I'm trans, and these are the struggles I deal with now. But then I was still in the process of writing the book back in October when I detransitioned. And then all of a sudden, I sat there looking at my book like, oh crap, like a lot of it has changed now. Like I can't publish it the way it's written because it was written so from the perspective of my trans identity. And so then when I detransitioned, I decided to go back and rewrite it with this new perspective, recognizing that, oh, I guess being trans is something that apparently can change because like I said, I grew up believing I was born that way and it would be forever. And so I was writing the book with that intention that this is something that's forever. You people out there in the world, you just need to affirm these kids that identify as trans because, and I still believe they should be affirmed lovingly, but maybe not given hormones like that. I don't know, like we discussed that about this. But
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit,
yeah,
a couple times.
a couple times. Uh, so yes, my book now is sharing my experience as a detrans person, as having it shares my childhood experiences growing up in the household I did and how that was being trans and things, and then shares my getting married and how my wife went through the whole transition with me, and then the towards the end of the book, of course, is where I then bring it all back to, well, now I went back to living as a man, so here are my opinions and perspectives on the matter now. And so it kind of evolved over time. But yeah, I went initially I called the book From He to She to Me because I thought that was appropriate. I did, but from he to she to me. But then it wasn't getting much attention. Like the title and things wasn't getting attention. So then I realized the whole topic is transgender. So I just decided to name it transgender. And then I said it is a belief and it can change,
Hmm.
which that offends a lot of people because it would have offended me back
It's
then too.
clickbaity. I'll give you that. It's a clickbaity title. I would
Uh,
click on that YouTube video.
yeah, and
I think I
that was
have clicked on that YouTube video.
that was one of the reasons I titled it that because I recognized it would probably get more attention, and it wasn't necessarily that I was trying to clickbait people, but I
But that's
wanted
what
it to
you.
get noticed.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
on Amazon now. I did have a publisher that was wanting to publish it, but then I didn't really feel right about them as a publisher.
How come?
It was mostly just a feeling. For one, they're in like England or London or something, and they wanted a bunch of money up front to publish it. And I thought, well, publisher that wants to publish a book and knows they're going to be making money off of it, it seems more like they should want to pay me for it. So,
Yeah, give you like that writer's advance or whatever.
exactly. So I passed on that one. I decided to just self-publish for now, but I did submit it to some other publishers that I'm waiting to hear back
Well, good luck. I hope it gets picked up there.
from.
Um, okay. I could ask you questions all day, but I'm gonna put that away because I told you I'll make. I don't want to scream in the mic. Sorry. I told you I will make that video asking you questions, and then you can respond, and we can have like a just back and forth on YouTube. And that's fun. But
Yeah.
I did want to ask: was there anything that you like wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted me to ask? Anything that you like? I don't know. Just throwing it out. Here's a free space. Was there anything that you wanted to answer that I didn't ask you that I want to ask you?
Hmm. Perhaps the only other thing we didn't really talk about that I think about is the fact that my wife had a daughter when I got with her. My wife's daughter was only 2.5 years old at the time. And so then when I transitioned, it was 2017. Yeah, she was like 6 years old when I transitioned. And I don't know if that brings up any questions in your mind, but she started calling me mama. It was a confusing thing to try to figure out how to navigate the child that's watching this happen in the household. And I didn't want to ever affect her in a negative way by doing so. And she wasn't really. She just accepted it. Okay,
Kids are
mommy,
pretty
like
go with the
choices.
flow.
Uh-huh. And then when I detransitioned, her only question was, "Are you gonna have another surgery?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Okay."
And that was that.
Uh-huh. So now I've been back
And she
living
was
at
12 then, roughly 12.
she's gonna be 12 in July, so she's 11.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that still is a pretty understanding. It sounds like a pretty understanding take. I guess I am curious. Well, okay, I've heard you talk a little bit about how you were uncomfortable to make her have like seen that, right? But I would like to ask, and like I don't want to be controversial, right? But I would like to ask, like, do you think that is healthier or less healthy than being exposed to, for example, like the kind of parents that you grew up with?
I think that regardless of how you live your life or express yourself, if you have love and you give love and attention and emotional connectivity to your kids, then yeah, even transition is far less affecting affects her far less than if she had had parents like I did, or a mom like I did anyway. So, and every household's different, of course.
Of course. Every
Every
person's different, so
uh, so it's hard to say if one household the kid is more traumatized by watching their parent transition than they would be in another household. Parents were verbally abusive or physically abusive. So, and again, that every kid is going to perceive it differently. Like my stepdaughter, where she was in her development and exposure to things in the world, she accepted it. We've always been very loving and accepting of all expressions, and gay people were never we never talked negative about anybody around her, so she didn't have any reason to have feelings about it, I guess, other than just her childlike perspective.
do you think that was traumatic for her? Because I know you mentioned things like, her friends would ask her, or I don't know if they were friends, other kids would ask her, like, is that your mom? Is that your dad? Like, who is that? Or just, just social engagement around the fact that you were at the time a trans woman. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, do you think that's traumatic, or do you think it's just kind of like, I don't know, low
That
key? I feel like she's just gonna be super based because you're very like understanding and open minded. So she's gonna grow up that way. It sounds like your wife is also that way. So it sounds like she's just open minded. But I guess
yeah.
in theory, she could be traumatized from this. It could be like the worst thing ever. She could end up in therapy for 30 years. But I don't know.
I sometimes say, just like we were talking about, two different kids can experience the same exact event, but have a different effects from it. So
Hmm.
I don't think she was traumatized by it, but I also didn't think I was traumatized as a child. Like
True.
most people say, "Oh, I had no trauma as a child. My childhood was great. My parents were great." But then when you really start looking at it closer, then there are things that can be classified as trauma or traumatic. So as far as she goes, I don't think she was traumatized. I feel like we handled it quite well and navigated it good to where she was not traumatized. But I do acknowledge that there are those things that would come up, like her being at school and having kids ask, "Is that your mom or your dad?" or "What's going on here?" And then when I detransitioned, I'm sure she got more questions.
Did anybody ever give her a hard time about it, or was it kind of just questions and then they just move on, kind of like she did, right? She had questions and then she just moved on.
Well, yeah, because the fact is, at her school, there actually is an LGBTQ club that she was part of, and she has friends there that
Hmm.
identify as trans too. So it's just part of the norm for her. So she, yeah, it was when she sees it at home and sees it at school, and she's like, okay. And I don't, yeah, because trauma is what we make it. What, depending on our perspectives at the time, what happens to us, trauma then becomes whatever we internalize it as. And if she didn't have any reason to be traumatized by it, which I don't really think she did,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was there anything about her that you wanted me to like ask specifically? Like you brought her up in my. Is there anything else you want me to ask you? But then you were just like, if you want to ask anything about it. But I wasn't sure if there's a specific question that you want me to like get at. And I want to
I
make
would,
sure that I do you the service that you want in this as well. Because I've really
yeah,
enjoyed this conversation. You know,
same.
we've been talking for 3 hours, so
Yeah, it's been fun. I don't know that there's anything specific. I think I was throwing that out there just in case it maybe triggered a question, which it did. But yeah, I think that was all I was wanting to say about that.
awesome. Um, let me think. Let me think. Let me see. Let me see. Was there anybody else that's watching this that has any other questions? Otherwise, I probably am gonna wrap it up relatively soon. Let me just look a little. Oh my gosh. Okay. There was a Chat GPT question. I actually wanna. How do you? Actually, I don't really care. It's just like how can we distinguish between genuine detransitioning and people that are detransitioning for like the social gain or like to like benefit from it, but
Kind of like
the
the detrans maxing.
yeah, but then does it even really matter in the grand scheme? Like you never know what another person is actually doing, or the sorry, I'm just holding a flosser. You never know the reason a person is actually doing anything that they're doing. So like, I don't know. Do you
Yeah,
do do you have a different opinion on that?
I I think it's unfortunate if someone feels like they have to detransition just to be comfortable. Because if you're more comfortable in your feminine identity and that feels right to you, then if you're put in a position where you feel like just in order to be safe and confident in the world, I have to detransition, that is so unfortunate. And I think that is a really sad place to be. I I personally did not detransition because it made my life easier, but it does certainly benefit.
It was a side effect. Yeah.
I still occasionally look at my dresses folded up in the closet and like, I wonder if that would feel good to wear that again. I don't think so because I fully identify as a man now, but I recognize that fluidity and The fact that
Ha-
I would never want someone to feel like they have to change themselves just to feel more comfortable.
yeah. Have you, worn any of your feminine garb uh since detransitioning? Or also, well, I have a follow-up after this, but I'll start with that.
I have not. I still wear my girls' underwear because that
Yeah.
doesn't get seen unless I'm at the YMCA and I'm in the men's changing room and I'm changing and then I try to hide it. But a
Is
lot of
that
men wear.
awkward for you?
It's a little awkward, especially because I have no penis. Changing in public spaces now is really interesting. I do it against the wall or in a private place because I just don't want people to have to be faced with that weirdness. Like, damn, that guy doesn't have a penis. What's going on? I
Kind
just
of
don't
kind
want
of
to go
gay that they're looking though in the locker room.
there. Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, I can see that being kind of awkward. Um,
yeah,
I've
yeah. Like
never, I've never liked locker rooms. They're always uncomfortable.
totally. Yeah, I've never. Of course, obviously, even before I transitioned, feeling like I was female my whole life, trying to change in men's locker rooms. I looked like a man, but I sure didn't feel like one. So it was
Yeah,
weird.
or that's what I mean too. I've never gone to a women's locker room, and if I do, I change in a stall because I don't like even in men's locker rooms. I would change in a stall. I don't like changing it around people. I don't want to see a bunch of naked people. I don't want to be naked around them.
Yeah.
That's not something I want. That's not a fun time for me.
Uh,
Uh-uh. Oh my gosh, I just had another question and I lost it because we talked about the locker rooms.
uh,
Um, oh my gosh. What did I ask you that brought this up?
um, well, you asked if I still wore any of my female
Oh
clothes.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And then my follow-up was, have you cross-dressed at all? Because in one of your interviews or in one of your videos, you talked about like cross-dressing in a sexual context before your transition. So I'm curious if that's something that is still like prevalent, if you're still like feeling your femininity through that, or if that's also something that was like discontinued. I also am curious if you did that through your transition as well. Um,
Not really. It was so much tied with my sense of identity and less my sexuality.
mm,
So while it's a weird one because while I recognize that early on in like before I transitioned, when I would put on my female clothes, I definitely felt very sexual, and it would always result in taking care of that feeling. And so, but it was more because I felt like I was feeling like the female I felt like I was inside anyway, and that now on the exterior I get to look that way too. And it
yeah.
made me feel more true to who I was. So then that excited those sexual feelings, but it wasn't that cross dressing was sexual for me. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So that, and you said you haven't like done that either.
No.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Sorry to end it out on an NSFW, but I was curious. Like I would say your feminine garb is more of like a daytime out like public thing, and then like cross dressing, and at least in my head is like a secret, private. Like this is what happens like in the confines kind of thing.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
it just feels like a different vibe. It feels like a drag queen versus trans woman kind of distinction.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, Buck Angel's interview was where he was asking me about cross dressing. It caught me off guard at first. He was like,
That's where I heard it. Yeah.
yeah. So he was like, were you cross dressing? I don't think so. I was dressing according to my internal feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I don't have any more questions. And if there's nothing else you would like to talk about, then I would just want to say thank you again so much for chatting with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Um,
Yeah.
I'm gonna link, whatever you want me to link down below. So if you can just send me any links you want, or I can just find them when I go to post it. But if you want to send it to me, it'll make it easier. Um,
Okay.
I'm assuming like your book, your YouTube channel. Do you have anything else, or do you have like a link aggregate, maybe like a link tree or beacons or something?
I have, but I've kind of, I don't know if it's still set up. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Just send
Yeah.
me whatever you want me to link on the video, and I'll link whatever you want. So
All right. Appreciate it.
yeah,
Yeah, I really appreciated this time too.
yeah. I really enjoyed it, and um I hope that your audience was able to come away with new insights that might have not been broached on other outside interviews that you've done. Um,
Yeah, that's
and we
what's
talked for a long time.
that's what's so fun, like I said, about being interviewed by different people, because it does naturally bring out more of the story that wouldn't organically just happen.
Yeah,
Like you said, talking for 3 hours, and there's still more that could be uncovered. Talked
there
about.
there always is more. I do these things sometimes where I host like a panel of people, and like I definitely would love to invite you to the next one. I don't know when it'll
Oh,
be yet, but is that something that you'd be interested in?
yeah, it would be.
Okay, well, I will make sure to keep that in mind then. And when it happens, you will have a DM. Okay,
All
thank you so
right.
much.
Yeah, well, thank you. Hope you have a good day.
You as well. Bye.
All right. Bye.